My name is Min Park, and 3 months ago I was the kind of guy who checked his bank balance before adding cheese to a burger. I was 24, living in a studio apartment so small that if I sneezed near the kitchen, the bathroom said bless you. I worked temporary office jobs, delivery shifts, and whatever else kept my landlord from turning me into a decorative object on the sidewalk. My greatest financial asset was a cracked rice cooker. My second greatest financial asset was a coupon for half-price socks that had expired 2 years ago. Then one Tuesday morning, I bought coffee. That was it. No lightning, no ancient inheritance, no billionaire grandfather arriving in a helicopter shaped like a dragon. I walked into a little cafe called Morning Bell, spent $4.80 on an iced coffee, complained internally about inflation, and left. That night, while I was eating instant noodles and watching a video about a guy restoring a submarine in his backyard for some reason, a translucent blue window appeared over my noodles. Passive income received, $3.21. I stared at it until the noodles became cold enough to qualify as emotional support worms. I checked my bank app. $3.21 had actually appeared. The description said Morning Bell Partnership Distribution. I did not own Morning Bell. I did not know anyone who owned Morning Bell. I had bought one coffee there, and my biggest contribution to the company had been asking for less ice. For the next 10 minutes, I assumed I had somehow committed financial fraud by existing. I refreshed the app 12 times. The money stayed. Then another blue window appeared. Registered business, Morning Bell Coffee, LLC. Qualification: legitimate commercial entity, personally visited and directly patronized. Ownership role: silent partner. Profit participation: 1% of future net profit. Duration: permanent. I nearly inhaled a noodle. 1%. Not 1% of my purchase. 1% of their future profit. Forever. I slept for maybe 11 minutes. The rest of the night I lay in bed staring at the ceiling while my brain sprinted naked through a casino screaming about compound income. At 6 in the morning I went back to Morning Bell so fast I put my shirt on backward and didn't notice until a bus driver looked at me like I was trying to escape a cult. The cafe looked normal. The same sleepy barista was wiping the counter. The same owner, Mrs. Bell, was arguing with a supplier on the phone about croissants. Nobody bowed to me. Nobody called me shareholder Min. I bought a muffin just to see what would happen. The blue window appeared again. Business already registered. Additional purchases do not increase profit participation. At that point, my bank balance was shaking ass so violently that basic arithmetic needed parental supervision. This whole situation was financially indecent. That crushed my first evil little idea. I could not buy 100 muffins and steal the whole cafe like some carbohydrate warlord. Then Mrs. Bell checked a tablet behind the counter and frowned. She told the barista that yesterday had been unusually good. A catering order, morning rush, and a corporate meeting had pushed their net profit for the day to $321. My payout had been exactly 1%. I stood there holding a blueberry muffin and realized my life had just become the weirdest economics anime ever made. Also, holy shit, I had accidentally become a business owner by purchasing caffeine. My degree in finance had been replaced by a receipt and aggressive hydration. If Warren Buffett saw me, he would have thrown his wallet into traffic. I needed rules. Systems always had rules. The difference between becoming rich and becoming a man who gets arrested while yelling about invisible windows was testing carefully. So I spent the day running experiments. I bought a wash cycle at Spin City Laundromat. Registered. I bought ramen at Nori House. Registered. I paid $12 for the cheapest haircut available at a barber shop and left looking like a frightened mushroom. Registered. I bought one banana at a grocery store. Registered. I paid for 15 minutes at a parking garage. Registered. Every time the system showed the legal business name, not the sign on the building. That mattered. The grocery store was branded Fresh Whale Market, but the registered company was Whale Retail Group Regional Operations LLC. The parking garage was run by Metrolot Holdings. The ramen place was simply Nori House Incorporated. That evening, money started arriving in tiny bursts. 68 cents, $2.13, $9.40, 4 cents, which somehow felt insulting. By midnight, I had made $37.89 by doing absolutely nothing except spending $46 on things I mostly needed anyway. Then the system gave me another clue. Profit distributions are generated only from finalized net profit. Losses do not create negative distributions. Partner liability, none. Administrative, accounting, compliance, and tax treatment Automatically resolved. I read the last sentence 6 times. Automatically resolved. That was the sexiest phrase I had ever seen. Forget candlelight. Forget roses. Tell me my taxes are automatically resolved and my pants may legally become a weather event. The next morning I called in sick to my temp job, not because I was rich. I had made $37. I called in sick because I had an idea. A terrifying, beautiful, deeply irresponsible idea. If a cafe could pay me 1% forever, what happened if I bought something from a much bigger business? I started with a car dealership. I could not afford a car, obviously. My checking account still flinched when I opened it, but dealerships sold other things. I walked into Titan Auto Center wearing my least wrinkled shirt and pretended I was browsing. A salesman appeared beside me with the supernatural speed of a shark-smelling credit score. I had somehow turned one normal purchase into the kind of money glitch that would make a crypto bro shit through a gaming chair. I told him I was interested in accessories. 10 minutes later, I bought a Titan Motors logo keychain from the parts counter for $9. The window appeared, registered business, Titan Metro Automotive Group, LLC. Profit participation, 1%. I almost dropped the keychain. Titan Metro did not own one dealership. It owned 14. I knew because the waiting room had a giant wall showing all 14 locations like they were collecting garages the way children collected Monster cards. I went home and searched public business records. Titan Metro sold thousands of cars a month, operated service centers, and owned used car lots across 3 counties. If their margin was even modest, 1% could be serious money. That night, my phone buzzed at 11:42. Passive income received, $1,846.09. I sat on the floor. Then I stood up. Then I sat down again because my knees had resigned. One keychain had earned me almost $2,000 in a day. My bank account looked like it had discovered steroids. I bought the keychain for $9. The return was so stupid that if a finance professor saw it, his calculator would call the police. That was when I stopped thinking small. The next morning, I opened a spreadsheet and created a column called Target Businesses. Then I deleted the spreadsheet because that looked like work and opened a map instead. My first target was Lakeshore Grand Hotel. Hotels were beautiful for my purposes because they made money from rooms, events, restaurants, parking, weddings, spas, and probably charging $12 for a bottle of water that had once been emotionally near a glacier. But I did not want to spend $300 on a room if I could avoid it. I walked into the lobby gift shop and bought the cheapest object available, a postcard for $2. Registered business, Lakeshore Hospitality Holdings. I froze. Holdings. That word was financial catnip. I checked their website in the lobby. Lakeshore Hospitality Holdings owned 6 hotels, 2 conference centers, and a resort with a golf course so expensive that the grass probably had a retirement plan. I had purchased a postcard. By lunch, I had visited a movie theater, a bowling alley, a hardware store, a furniture warehouse, and an office supply chain. I spent the minimum at each place. A screw, a pencil, a child-sized popcorn, 1 hour of bowling in shoes that had definitely witnessed crimes. Every legal entity registered. The system did not care whether my purchase was impressive. It cared that I personally entered the business and directly spent my own money there. That produced the first important limitation. Online purchases did not work. I tried buying a $5 digital subscription from my apartment. Nothing. I tried ordering delivery. Nothing. My wallet was no longer a wallet. It was a horny little spreadsheet kicking down doors and demanding 1% of the building. I tried sending my neighbor downstairs with $10 to buy me chips. Nothing. Personal presence mattered. The system wanted me physically inside the commercial location when I made the transaction. I had become a supernatural coupon that only activated through foot traffic. By Friday, I had registered 38 businesses. My daily passive income crossed $8,000. I quit my temp job with the calm dignity of a man who had just realized his barber was paying him dividends. I did not tell my boss the truth. I simply said I was pursuing an opportunity in private equity. Technically, that was not even a lie. It was just missing the part where my private equity strategy involved buying bananas like a deranged raccoon. The first person I told was my best friend, Kira Han. Kira worked in forensic accounting, which meant she could look at a company structure and detect nonsense the way a bloodhound detected ham. She also had the personality of a missile with glasses. I showed her the bank deposits, the system windows, and the registration list. She spent 15 minutes checking for malware, another 20 checking whether I had joined a cult, and 5 minutes asking whether I had recently been struck in the head by a refrigerator. Then I took her to a bakery I had never visited before. I bought 1 dinner roll. The system registered Golden Grain Foods LLC right in front of us. Kira could not see the blue window, but she watched the transaction. The next morning I showed her the new payout. She stopped laughing. That was when everything accelerated. Kira explained that the name on a storefront was basically a costume. The real prize was the legal entity receiving the money. One store could be owned by a tiny franchisee. Another identical store 2 blocks away could be directly owned by a billion-dollar corporation. So instead of wandering randomly, we started hunting merchant structures. Kira built me a target list ranked by something she called profit density per stupid purchase. I called it the cheap snack to rich bastard ratio. She told me never to say that in front of an investor. I told her I was the investor. She threw a stapler at me. Our first engineered target was Galaxy Mega Mall. Galaxy was not merely a shopping center. It was a commercial biome. It had 400 stores, 3 hotels, an indoor amusement park, an aquarium, a luxury wing, a medical clinic, 14 restaurants that serve noodles in bowls more expensive than my old monthly utility bill, and a parking operation owned by Galaxy Properties Corporation. We arrived at 9 in the morning. I paid $5 to park. Registered business, Galaxy Properties Corporation. Kira nearly bit through her pen. Galaxy Properties owned 12 malls and 32 office towers. The return on that purchase was so filthy I felt like I should clear my browser history after checking the bank app. I had not even entered the building yet. Inside we followed a carefully planned route. I bought a cookie from a corporate-owned bakery, a phone cable from an electronics retailer, a packet of mints from a department store, and a cheap novelty crown from the indoor amusement park. The crown said Mall King. I wore it because the universe had clearly surrendered its standards. At lunch, I purchased 1 dumpling from a chain restaurant. Registered. I paid for 1 game at the arcade. Registered. I bought travel-size shampoo from a pharmacy. Registered. By mid-afternoon, I had spent $217 and registered 29 companies. Then we hit the luxury wing. A designer boutique sold nothing under $300, so we skipped it. A jewelry company had a corporate-owned repair desk that charged $20 to clean watches. I did not own a fancy watch, but Kira handed them her old one, and I paid. Registered. A luxury auto showroom had a vending machine selling branded espresso capsules. I bought 1 too. Registered, Europa Performance Imports, North America. Kira stared at the screenshot I typed into my notes. Europa imported and distributed an entire luxury car brand across the continent. I had spent $12 on coffee capsules. At that point, my financial life was basically mugging capitalism with pocket change. By the time we left, my feet hurt, my wallet was lighter, and my future income had become difficult to estimate. That night, payouts hit in waves so quickly my banking app stopped sending individual notifications and summarized them instead. Daily partnership distributions $42,611.73. I stared at the number while wearing my Mall King crown in my apartment. Kira looked at me, looked at the crown, and said my life had become financially obscene. She was right. My income graph had gone vertical so hard it looked like the line was trying to leave the planet. My broke era had not ended. It had been executed behind a dumpster. But the next morning, something new happened. A certified envelope arrived from Titan Metro Automotive Group. Inside was a formal letter welcoming me as a silent economic participation partner. There were signatures, legal language, a tax identification reference. My name had appeared in their internal records overnight as if I had always belonged there. The system was not merely giving me money. It was rewriting reality just enough to make the money legitimate. That meant accountants could see me. Corporate lawyers could see me. Executives could see a mysterious 24-year-old receiving 1% of their profits forever, and eventually they were going to ask why. The first phone call came from Lakeshore Hospitality. Their finance director politely wanted to understand the basis of my permanent profit participation. I was not investing anymore. I was basically raw-dogging capitalism with receipts, and somehow capitalism kept sending thank you notes. I also wanted to understand the basis of my permanent profit participation, so we were both having a difficult morning. I gave the safest possible answer. I said the arrangement had been properly recorded and that I was a passive stakeholder with no operational control, which was true. He said their attorneys had already confirmed the paperwork was valid. Also true, apparently. Then he asked when I had negotiated it. I looked at the $2 postcard stuck to my refrigerator and said the transaction was confidential. That was technically true because if I explained it, he would assume I had smoked a haunted spreadsheet. After the call, I realized something beautiful. The system protected itself. It did not mind curiosity, but every registration generated whatever contracts, records, filings, or accounting entries were necessary to make my 1% legal. No one could sue it away. No one could cancel me. No one could even prove anything improper had happened. All they knew was that Min Park had somehow become entitled to 1%. Kira said we needed to move faster before large companies noticed a pattern, so we targeted chains. The trick was finding corporate-owned locations rather than franchises. We drove across the city with Kira reading legal ownership data while I performed transactions like the world's cheapest corporate raider. At a pizza chain, I bought dipping sauce. At a gym chain, I bought a one-day pass and spent 4 minutes pretending to stretch. At a pet supply company, I bought a rubber duck designed for dogs, even though I did not own a dog. At a tire chain, I bought a valve cap. At a home improvement company, I bought a single washer. At a shipping company, I mailed an empty envelope to myself. Registered, registered, registered. That last one made Kira laugh so hard she had to sit down. 3 days later, the empty envelope arrived at my apartment. I opened it and found nothing inside except my own financial audacity. The daily total crossed $100,000. I upgraded my apartment, but not much. I rented a nice 2-bedroom because Kira insisted she needed a war room. I bought a comfortable mattress. I replaced the rice cooker, although I kept the cracked one on a shelf as a reminder that poverty had once tried to square up with me and lost. I did not buy a sports car, not yet, because every dollar I spent on luxury was a dollar I could spend activating another business. That sentence made me sound responsible, but I should clarify that I was also using corporate money to buy 1-cent screws for supernatural profit rights. My life was responsible in the same way a raccoon with a stock portfolio is responsible. My passive income was throwing ass like rent was due, except rent could now borrow money from me and still get rejected. Then Kira found the first true monster, North Star Department Group. North Star operated hundreds of department stores, but most locations processed payments through regional subsidiaries. One flagship store downtown, however, had an old in-house photography studio. According to corporate filings, the studio still billed directly through the parent operating company because nobody had updated the structure since the 90s. We went immediately. The studio offered passport photos for $16. I sat under a bright light while a bored employee took the ugliest photograph ever captured by human technology. I looked like I had just been informed that my skeleton owed taxes. I paid. The blue window appeared. Registered business, North Star Department Group, Incorporated. Estimated annual net profit based on current public data, $4.80 billion. My brain stopped. 1% of $4.8 billion was $48 million a year from passport photos. My ugly face had just become an asset class. Kira whispered that we should leave before someone noticed us. I walked out carrying 6 tiny photos of myself looking financially haunted. That night, the first North Star distribution arrived. $132,406.77. One day. I had made more in one day from a $16 passport photo than my parents had once earned in several years. I did not scream. I made a sound like a microwave being pushed downstairs. Then I lay on the floor while Kira calculated projections. My expected annual income was now above $50 million, and that was before we added anything else. I looked at the ceiling and understood that my original question had changed. I was no longer asking whether the system was real. I was asking how big a business I could touch with one purchase. And the answer was about to get incredibly stupid. The first thing a newly rich idiot wants to do is celebrate. The first thing Kira wanted to do was inspect banking fee schedules. This is why she was useful. Banks were businesses. Banks made profit. Banks also had branches where I could physically spend money. The problem was finding a payment that counted as a direct purchase from the actual banking entity. Depositing money did not count because I was not spending it. Withdrawing money did not count because that was just retrieving my own cash. Paying a credit card bill did not count because the system apparently had standards. Then Kira found a branch that charged a $10 fee for printing and notarizing certain financial documents for non-members. I walked in, asked for a certified copy of a document I did not need, paid $10, and felt the universe begin giggling. Registered business, Imperial Union Bank, N.A. I checked the bank's latest reports. Annual net profit, over $11 billion. I had just purchased a $10 stamp and secured roughly $110 million a year in profit participation. That payout was so disrespectful to normal employment that my old resume probably rolled over in a drawer and whispered, "You bastard." I walked out of the branch holding that notarized page like it was a sacred tablet delivered by the god of ridiculous passive income. By the time I reached the sidewalk, my knees were weak. Kira looked at me and asked whether I was okay. I told her I had just become so rich that my future grandchildren were going to be born with credit scores. Then the blue system flashed a new achievement. Total registered businesses, 100. Portfolio milestone reached. New function unlocked. Merchant Preview. When I looked at a point-of-sale terminal, a faint line of blue text now appeared over it, showing the legal entity that would receive the payment. This changed everything. Before, Kira had to research ownership structures. Now I could walk into a store, glance at the register, and know exactly what company I was about to attach myself to. I tested it at a fried chicken place. The terminal showed Spicy Bird Franchise Unit 881 LLC, tiny local entity. Skip. Across the street, another location of the same chain showed Spicy Bird Restaurants Corporation, corporate owned. I bought one biscuit. Registered. Kira watched me chew the biscuit with the expression of a woman observing a laboratory rat that had somehow become chairman of the Federal Reserve. The merchant preview also exposed weird opportunities. A small bookstore inside a train station was not billed through the bookstore chain. It was billed through Continental Rail Services because the railway company directly operated the retail kiosks. I bought a bookmark. Registered. Continental Rail Services Corporation. A museum cafe was directly operated by the private company that managed several convention centers. I bought sparkling water. Registered. An office tower parking machine belonged to the real estate corporation that owned the entire tower portfolio. I paid for 20 minutes. Registered. My strategy evolved from shopping to legal entity fishing. I was no longer a customer. I was a mosquito with access to corporate filings, a very wealthy mosquito. Within 2 weeks, my annualized income passed $300 million. That was when I bought my first private jet ticket. Not a private jet, a seat on a scheduled private aviation shuttle between our city and another financial hub. It cost me $800, which would have caused my old self to disintegrate on contact. I paid at the operator's lounge counter. Registered business, Stratos Executive Aviation. The flight lasted 40 minutes. By the time we landed, Stratos had paid me back more than the ticket cost. Kira told me that sentence made her physically angry. Our destination was an airport containing a target she had been researching for days. Skylink Air Group. Airlines were tricky. Tickets bought through apps did not count. Airport counters often processed payments through local subsidiaries. Airport shops were contractors. We needed a direct transaction with the parent airline. I had crossed from lucky into financially slutty, where every harmless little card swipe came home carrying another lifetime income stream. We found it in the most pathetic possible place. Oversized baggage. Skylink's flagship terminal had a service desk where passengers could purchase branded luggage straps directly from the airline for $6. I had no luggage that needed a strap. I bought 3 anyway because the employee looked concerned about my enthusiasm. The terminal glowed blue. Registered business, Skylink Air Group Incorporated. Kira closed her eyes. I checked the projected profits. The airline group had cargo, maintenance contracts, loyalty program revenue, regional carriers, and a giant aircraft leasing division. My expected cut was absurd. A few hours later, I got my first distribution from them, $286,000 from luggage straps. This was no longer capitalism. This was me walking around with a supernatural debit card and lightly slapping the economy on the ass. That day, we registered the airport parking operator, an airport hotel group, a rental car company, an aircraft catering company with a public cafeteria, and an aviation fuel supplier that sold branded fuel sample bottles in its visitor center as novelty desk ornaments. Yes, I bought a bottle labeled not for use. Yes, it registered the fuel supplier. No, I did not drink it. I say that because Kira looked at me like she thought the money had removed my survival instincts. The next target was more complicated. Manufacturing companies were rich, but most factories did not sell random visitors anything. You could not stroll into a semiconductor plant and ask for one microchip like you were buying gum. So Kira started searching for factory tours. We found Titan Forge Machinery, a company that built industrial equipment for mines, ports, and construction firms. Its largest plant offered a guided tour twice a month. Tickets cost $25 and were sold by Titan Forge itself. I bought one. Registered. The tour guide proudly explained how the factory produced giant hydraulic systems used on equipment around the world. I nodded like a serious industrial investor. Inside my head, I was screaming because 1% of Titan Forge's profit was being routed to a man wearing a visitor helmet labeled Guest 14. At the end of the tour, the guide let us stand beside a mining excavator bucket large enough to hold a small house. Kira took a picture of me inside it. I used that picture as my phone background for weeks because it perfectly represented my business strategy. I had climbed into an industrial machine I did not understand and somehow money was happening. The factory success opened a new category. Visitor centers. Corporate visitor centers were apparently the backdoor of capitalism. A beverage bottling company sold tour tickets. Registered. A chocolate manufacturer sold factory tours and tiny sample tins. Registered. A furniture manufacturer had a museum charging admission. Registered. Somewhere an economics textbook was crying in the shower because this shit could not be explained with supply and demand anymore. A giant paper company operated a forestry education center with a gift shop directly under the parent entity. I bought a pencil made from recycled sawdust and became entitled to 1% of a multinational paper empire. A chemical company had an innovation museum for schools. Admission was free, which was useless. But the museum sold safety goggles for $3. Registered. I was making tens of millions of dollars from companies whose products I could not explain without pointing at a factory and saying, "They make big stuff." My education had become aggressively optional. Then the system taught me another rule. One afternoon, a small restaurant I had registered was purchased by a larger dining group. I expected nothing special. The next distribution came from the original restaurant's profit only. The acquiring group did not register automatically. Corporate acquisition does not expand participation beyond the registered legal entity. Kira nodded. No free contagion? Then, 3 days later, one of my registered companies acquired another company and merged it directly into the same legal entity rather than keeping it separate. The system flashed. Registered entity expanded through statutory merger. Profit participation applies to all profit legally generated by the surviving entity. That made Kira drop her coffee. This rule was enormous. I could not gain subsidiaries automatically, but if my registered entity absorbed another company into itself, my 1% expanded with it. I suddenly cared deeply about merger structures. Imagine being 24 and learning corporate law because an invisible magic interface might pay you forever. My ancestors had survived wars and recessions, so I could sit in a luxury apartment saying things like statutory consolidation while eating dinosaur-shaped chicken nuggets. That week, the news broke that North Star Department Group was planning to absorb a smaller retail chain into the parent company. If the deal closed, my payout would expand automatically. I did absolutely nothing. The deal closed. My projected annual income jumped another $9 million. At that moment, I discovered the most powerful investment technique in history: laziness. But there was a problem. Companies were starting to notice me, not just one or two finance directors. A pattern was forming. At an executive conference I was not invited to, someone apparently asked why an unknown man named Min Park appeared as a 1% permanent profit participant across dozens of unrelated companies. Rumors spread through corporate legal departments. Some thought I represented a secret sovereign fund. Some thought I was the beneficiary of an ancient network of contracts. One insane forum post claimed I was the illegitimate grandson of 5 different billionaires, which was biologically ambitious. Then a business journalist published an article titled, "Who is Min Park?" The photo they used was my North Star passport picture. I wanted to sue reality. My account had more incoming money than a thirst trap had comments, and somehow the least dignified object in the room was still me. The article listed 16 companies where my interest had become visible in filings or accounting disclosures. It estimated my net worth at over $200 million. The article was wrong. My liquid account alone was approaching that number. My profit rights were worth far more. Kira told me not to correct them. Public attention was dangerous because companies could start blocking me from buying anything. I laughed at first. Then we arrived at a luxury hotel group in another city and found my face printed behind the concierge desk. "Do not process direct purchases for this individual without executive approval." I stared at my own face. It was the ugly passport picture again. That photo was haunting me harder than student debt. The hotel had figured it out, not how the system worked exactly, but they suspected that allowing me to spend money triggered something. The concierge apologized and refused to sell me a bottle of water. I walked outside. Kira said we had entered a new phase. Now the businesses were playing defense. That sounded exciting until I discovered how ridiculous corporate defense could become. One restaurant group instructed staff to comp anything I ordered. If I tried to pay, they refused. I received free steak, but no registration. A rental car company put a note in its system that all rentals for Min Park were complimentary. A hotel upgraded me to a suite, gave me dinner, sent champagne, and absolutely refused to accept 1 cent. Imagine becoming so financially terrifying that capitalism starts hiding from your wallet. I tried leaving cash on a counter. The system did not count it because the business had not accepted the payment. I tried tipping an employee. No registration because that was not direct business revenue. I tried purchasing through Kira while standing beside her. No registration because I was not personally paying. The rules were annoyingly clean. Kira said we needed stealth. I bought a baseball cap, plain glasses, and a fake mustache from a costume store. The costume store registered immediately. The disguise did not work anywhere else because I looked like a detective who had been fired for eating evidence. So we became smarter. Instead of famous front doors, we hunted obscure revenue streams where nobody expected me. A global hotel corporation refused me at its flagship hotel, but its corporate headquarters owned a public parking structure. I drove in, paid $12 at the automated machine, and the merchant preview showed the parent hospitality company, Registered. The hotel group had spent a week warning every front desk on the continent about me, and I defeated them by parking badly for 17 minutes. That payout was worth an estimated $70 million a year. I laughed so hard in the elevator that a stranger moved away from me. The numbers were getting so obscene that if my calculator had cheeks, compound interest would have been clapping them like cymbals. This is where my story became less like investing and more like a heist movie written by someone with a concussion. We targeted side doors, corporate cafeterias, museum tickets, parking fees, branded merchandise, notary services, visitor tours, repair counters, employee stores open to the public, paid charging stations, coin-operated lockers. If a giant corporation accepted even $1 from the public at a physical location, I wanted to know where. Kira hired 2 researchers, then 6, then 20. We formed a company called Quiet Harbor Research because she refused to let me name it Cheap Snack Capital. The company had one purpose: identify physical points of sale linked directly to highly profitable legal entities. I paid salaries generously. I gave everyone bonuses. I offered full benefits. And because Quiet Harbor was my own company, the system did not register it when I bought office snacks. Apparently, I could not become a 1% partner in myself, which was fair because that would have been financial masturbation. I said that phrase in a staff meeting exactly once. Kira banned me from speaking at staff meetings for a week. The researchers found our first billion-dollar loophole 3 days later. A global insurance company called Meridian Assurance owned a historic headquarters building with a public observation deck. Tickets were sold through Meridian Assurance itself because the observation deck was considered a corporate outreach program with paid admission. Kira slid the address across the table like she was giving me nuclear launch codes. Meridian earned nearly $9 billion in annual net profit. 1% meant $90 million for a $12 skyline view. We flew there the next morning. The building had security at every entrance. My face was becoming known, but not universally. We entered during a crowded tourist period. I wore a hoodie, not because I was trying to look suspicious, but because every attempt at looking unsuspicious had made me look like I sold counterfeit kidneys. At the ticket machine, the merchant preview appeared. Meridian Assurance Corporation. My pulse jumped. I inserted my card. The machine spun. Payment processing. Then it rejected the transaction. I tried again. Rejected. Kira checked the screen. My card worked everywhere else. Meridian had apparently flagged my name at the payment processor level. That was new. We stood there while tourists flowed around us. $90 million a year was $12 away, and a database was cock-blocking my retirement plan. Then I noticed the machine accepted coins. Actual coins. The building was old, the ticket system had been upgraded in pieces, and one ancient cash module still took quarters and dollar coins. Cash did not carry my name. I fed $12 into the machine. The ticket printed. The system window exploded into view. Registered business, Meridian Assurance Corporation. I felt like a goblin who had found the economy's hidden G-spot, except the button was usually labeled parking fee or souvenir photo. I looked at Kira. Kira looked at me. Then we both looked at the little pile of rejected card receipts on the floor. Somewhere in Meridian's cybersecurity department, a team had built a sophisticated payment block to stop one mysterious man from acquiring 1% of company profits. I beat them with quarters. My grandma could have executed that cyber attack. That evening, Meridian paid me $241,883. The next morning, every coin slot at the observation deck had been covered with metal plates. Too late. Forever meant forever. Meridian's defeat turned me into a corporate ghost story. Executives began forwarding internal memos with my picture and increasingly dramatic instructions. Do not accept payment from Min Park. Do not swipe his card. Do not let him use vending machines connected to corporate accounts. Do not let him buy parking. Do not let him purchase photocopies, souvenirs, cafeteria food, tickets, replacement parts, locker rentals, charging sessions, or anything else that could reasonably be described as a product or service. One memo included a line that said, if Mr. Park insists on paying, provide the item free of charge. I had achieved something no coupon app in history had accomplished. Fortune-level corporations were begging me to take free stuff. At first, this was amazing. I ate for free at 3 expensive restaurants. A hotel chain gave me a suite with a bathtub large enough to host naval exercises. A luxury car company offered me a complimentary weekend test drive as long as I promised not to buy gas from their dealership pump. But free things were not the goal. The goal was 1%. Kira's research team divided targets into 3 categories. Green targets had easy public transactions. Yellow targets had obscure public transactions requiring some creativity. Red targets had actively blocked me or did not sell anything directly to ordinary people. The largest red target was Vane Global Industries. Vane Global was an absurd conglomerate built by Mara Vane, a billionaire famous for acquiring companies the way normal people collected unread emails. Vane owned logistics firms, data centers, industrial robotics, construction equipment, renewable power systems, medical devices, marine engines, packaging plants, and a chain of boring office parks that somehow printed money. Annual net profit was more than $20 billion. 1% would be over $200 million a year. Mara Vane also knew exactly who I was. She had apparently created an internal task force called Transaction Shield. That name was so dramatic I almost respected it. The task force identified every publicly accessible Vane-operated point of sale and removed direct payments. The company museum became free. The headquarters parking garage became free. The employee cafeteria stopped accepting money from visitors. The visitor center gift shop temporarily closed for inventory modernization, which was corporate language for Min Park is outside with a debit card and everyone is panicking. That tiny receipt had more financial pull than a billionaire's yacht, which was some premium-grade bullshit if I had ever seen it. Kira showed me the changes on a tablet. I laughed. Vane Global had sacrificed actual revenue to avoid me spending $7. I was not even angry. I felt honored. Then a courier delivered a black envelope to our office. Inside was an invitation from Mara Vane herself. She offered to meet me at Vane Global headquarters. Kira thought it might be a trap. I pointed out that I was not an international spy. I was a guy who bought strategic muffins. We went. Vane headquarters was a glass tower that looked like someone had converted an expensive knife into real estate. Security escorted us to the top floor. Mara Vane was in her 40s, calm, sharp, and surrounded by enough minimalist furniture to make sitting down feel like a merger. She did not waste time. She knew the pattern. Every company where I had made a direct purchase suddenly owed me 1% of future profit under legally perfect agreements nobody remembered signing. She did not know how. I did not explain. She offered me $50 million to sign a contract promising never to purchase anything from Vane Global or its subsidiaries. I almost admired the number. Then I did the math. 50 million once versus more than 200 million every year forever. I declined. She increased the offer to 100 million. I declined again. She stared at me for a long moment, probably wondering whether I was brave, stupid, or a sentient accounting error. The correct answer was all 3. The meeting ended politely. Security walked us toward the elevator. That should have been the end of it. Then I saw a vending machine in the executive hallway. My merchant preview activated automatically. Vane Global Industries Incorporated. I stopped walking. Kira nearly crashed into me. The vending machine was old. It sold bottled water and protein bars. Someone had forgotten it existed. Security noticed where I was looking. The atmosphere changed instantly. One guard moved between me and the machine. Another reached for his radio. I did not run. That would have been insane. I simply held up both hands and kept walking. Mara had almost certainly ordered the machine unplugged before our elevator reached the lobby, but now I knew there was a direct payment point inside the building. And more importantly, I knew the machine vendor was Vane Global itself. Kira called it impossible. We could not just break into headquarters for a protein bar. I agreed. Breaking in would be illegal, and the system only registered legitimate transactions anyway. So I did something worse. I became annoying. For 3 weeks, I accepted every public invitation Vane Global issued. Industry Expo? I registered. Robotics Demonstration? I registered. Sustainability Panel? I registered. Shareholder Open House? I registered. My net worth kept rising with the energy of a drunk elevator, and I was the idiot inside pressing every damn button. I did not even own Vane stock at first, so I bought 1 share on the market, which did not count for the system, but did qualify me for certain events. At every Vane event, I looked for direct purchases. They removed them all. Food was free. Parking was free. Merchandise was free. At one conference, employees literally handed me a tote bag full of products without letting me pay. I left with 3 water bottles, a notebook, a miniature robot, and no registration. I was being defeated by generosity. This was bullshit of the highest corporate order. My enemies had discovered the one move I could not counter: Customer service. Then Vane Global announced a charity technology auction at headquarters. Employees had built novelty robots, and guests could bid. Proceeds would go to a children's science foundation. Kira immediately said no. The auction proceeds were charitable donations, not business revenue. The system would probably reject it. She was right, but the event had something else. A paid coat check service. Not the auction. Not the food. Not the robots. Coat check. The headquarters facilities department ran it directly during large events because of insurance requirements. It cost $2. I attended in the ugliest winter coat I owned, even though the weather was warm. Security recognized me immediately. One guard looked at the coat, then at me, then at the coat again. His face said he understood the entire plot. He rushed toward the coat check desk. I walked faster. He walked faster. I still did not run because being tackled by corporate security while holding a trench coat would create the worst headline imaginable. At the desk, an elderly attendant smiled and held out a claim ticket. I gave her $2. The guard shouted that the service was complimentary. The attendant had already dropped the coins into the cash drawer. The system appeared. Registered business, Vane Global Industries Incorporated. Estimated annual net profit based on current data, $21.40 billion. My profit participation, 1%. I looked over my shoulder. Mara Vane was standing across the lobby. She had seen everything. Her expression did not change. Mine probably looked like a raccoon discovering the nuclear launch button was made of cheese. I collected my coat immediately because I am not a monster. The next day, Vane Global sent me $602,441.18. The coat check fee had cost $2. My return after 24 hours was more than 300,000 times the purchase price. I framed the claim ticket. Mara Vane removed paid coat check from every company building worldwide. Again, too late. After Vane, other red targets began offering settlements before I even arrived. A shipping corporation offered me free lifetime package delivery. A luxury hotel empire offered free rooms anywhere in the world. At this rate, my bank app was going to need safe words because the incoming transfers were becoming aggressively non-consensual looking. A food conglomerate offered to send me 1 truckload of snacks every month. I declined all of them. I did accept a sample box of snacks because I am not an idiot. The shipping corporation was next. Oceanspan Logistics operated container ships, freight terminals, warehouses, and last-mile delivery networks. The problem was that its public shipping stores were separately incorporated subsidiaries. Paying at one would not capture the parent. Quiet Harbor found an exception at a coastal freight terminal. Oceanspan itself sold temporary visitor safety badges to independent truck drivers and contractors who forgot theirs. $5 direct billing. The terminal was not tourist-friendly. It was a working port full of trucks, cranes, warning signs, and people who looked like they knew exactly how many tons could fall on you before paperwork became inconvenient. We had a legitimate reason to enter because Quiet Harbor rented a small warehouse unit nearby and had scheduled a supplier meeting. I presented identification, completed safety training, and reached the visitor office. The clerk scanned my name. Her eyes widened. She said my badge fee was waived. Of course it was. I asked to pay anyway. She refused. I offered cash. She refused harder. Then a truck driver behind me started complaining that the badge printer had eaten his payment. The clerk opened the machine to reset it. I saw the merchant preview over the terminal. Oceanspan Logistics Corporation. But I could not use someone else's transaction. I needed my own. The clerk handed me a free badge and told me to proceed. I walked away. Kira could tell from my face that I had seen something. We spent the next hour wandering the allowed visitor areas pretending to discuss warehouse operations. Then I noticed a giant industrial scale near the exit. Truckers used it to weigh vehicles. The first weigh was part of terminal access, but reweighs cost $3 and were paid through a small kiosk. I did not have a truck. Quiet Harbor did. We had rented one for the supplier meeting. I drove it onto the scale very badly. Kira was in the passenger seat reconsidering every choice that had led her there. The machine printed the weight. Then I deliberately moved a box from one side of the cargo area to the other and requested a reweigh. The clerk said it was unnecessary. I said I was extremely interested in weight distribution. That sentence sounded like I was either a logistics professional or about to start selling fake diet tea. I paid $3. Registered business, Oceanspan Logistics Corporation. The system chimed. The truck weighed almost exactly the same. I had gained 1% of a global shipping company in exchange for learning that moving one cardboard box did not meaningfully alter a truck's mass. I had made so much from such a stupid purchase that the phrase honest day's work briefly looked at me and walked into traffic. Science. Oceanspan's first weekly distribution was 7 figures. Kira updated my projected income. We had crossed $1 billion per year. career. I was now on paper richer than many celebrities, athletes, and executives who had spent decades building careers. I had spent 6 months buying low-cost nonsense in strategically chosen buildings. This felt disrespectful to human civilization. To celebrate, I finally bought a car. Nothing insane. A nice electric sedan. I purchased it from a dealership I had already registered because I did not want the transaction wasted. The salesman offered an extended service package. I declined because I may have had infinite passive income, but I still had dignity. Then he offered floor mats. I bought them because apparently my dignity had conditions. The next system milestone appeared at 500 registered businesses. Portfolio milestone reached. New function unlocked. Profit pulse. A tiny number now floated beside registered businesses showing real-time profit generation estimates. I could stand inside a hotel lobby and watch my share accumulate. At a busy supermarket, the number moved a few cents every second. At Imperial Union Bank's headquarters, it moved so quickly I got dizzy. At Vane Global, the pulse looked like a taximeter during an apocalypse. This feature did not make me richer. It made me more addicted. Money had turned into a video game score. Kira warned me about that. I told her I remained perfectly grounded. Then I spent 20 minutes watching a parking operator generate 31 cents for me while eating cereal out of a champagne flute. She said I needed hobbies. I told her this was a hobby. She said hobbies were not supposed to make accountants sweat through their shirts. That was when the international phase began. The richest companies were not all in my country. Some were headquartered across oceans. Some were state-backed enterprises. Some operated giant resource networks. Some were technology manufacturers with campuses the size of towns. Quiet Harbor produced a world map full of targets. I looked at it and felt the old broke version of myself briefly return. 6 months earlier, international travel had meant watching airport videos on my phone while eating noodles. Now I could fly anywhere. More importantly, every trip could pay for itself millions of times over. My passport was about to become a weapon. Our first international target was Orem Motor Works, a luxury automaker famous for selling cars that cost more than small houses and cup holders that probably required graduate degrees. Orem's factories were heavily controlled. Their dealerships were independent. Their museum, however, was owned directly by the manufacturing company. Perfect. I flew across the ocean, arrived at the museum, and discovered my name had beaten me there. The ticket clerk smiled and informed me admission was complimentary. The system was cooking so hard my financial statements looked like they had been left alone with cocaine and a motivational podcast. I looked at Kira. Kira looked at the ceiling as if asking the universe why rich people had learned. The gift shop was also free for me. An employee offered to let me take anything I wanted. I picked up a model car priced at $100. He said it was a gift. I picked up a jacket. Gift. A book. Gift. A ridiculous umbrella shaped like a racing tire. Gift. I had entered a luxury automaker's headquarters with unlimited free merchandise and somehow felt oppressed. Then I noticed the museum had old-fashioned lockers near the exhibition entrance. Visitors inserted a €2 coin, locked the compartment, and received the coin back when they reopened it. Refundable deposit, not revenue. Useless. Next to the lockers was a photo booth that printed souvenir driver licenses featuring the visitor sitting in a race car simulator. €5. Merchant preview. Orem Motor Works AG. My soul left my body, circled the booth, and came back wearing sunglasses. I climbed into the simulator before any employee noticed. The screen asked me to choose a racing nickname. I typed Dividend Goblin. Kira told me no. I pressed confirm. The machine photographed me gripping a fake steering wheel with the facial intensity of a man trying to outrun taxes. I tapped my card. The payment approved. Registered business, Orem Motor Works AG. An employee sprinted toward us approximately 4 seconds too late. My souvenir license printed with my name, picture, and the title Dividend Goblin in bright letters. It may be the most valuable piece of plastic ever created. Orem's annual profit was massive. My 1% was worth tens of millions. The company disabled the booth before we left the museum. I kept the fake license in my wallet. That trip established our new international routine. We arrived quietly. Quiet Harbor checked local rules, business structures, and public payment systems. I personally made one legitimate purchase. The system registered the entity. We left before some executive could order every cash register buried at sea. In Switzerland, I registered a precision instrument manufacturer by paying for a factory museum audio guide. In Italy, I registered a luxury fashion group through a paid tailoring demonstration at a heritage workshop. In Germany, I registered an industrial chemical giant by buying lunch at a public canteen attached to its corporate visitor center. In the Netherlands, I paid for a harbor tour run directly by a port logistics company. In South Korea, I visited an electronics corporation's innovation center. Admission was free, merchandise was free, charging was free, and I thought we had failed until Kira found a booth that printed custom phone cases. I paid 8,000 won for a case featuring a cartoon potato. Registered. The company made semiconductors, displays, appliances, batteries, and enough electronics to power a small civilization. I was collecting corporations like a degenerate kid collecting shiny cards, except every card kept mailing me enough money to ruin a neighborhood group chat. My phone case said potato mode. The profit rights attached to it were worth more than some countries' annual budgets. This was the kind of financial obscenity that makes a calculator ask to be baptized. The semiconductor business became especially important. Chips were inside everything. Cars, servers, phones, industrial machines, smart appliances, medical equipment, probably my new rice cooker if it was feeling ambitious. One of the largest chip manufacturers, Vector Silicon, had no retail stores. Its fabrication plants were secure. Its headquarters did not charge visitors for anything. Red Target. Then a Quiet Harbor researcher discovered that Vector Silicon sponsored a technical training center for engineers. The center sold printed certification manuals directly to attendees. The public could enroll in a one-day introductory seminar for $200. Expensive compared with my usual nonsense, but still basically free relative to the target. I enrolled under my real name. Vector Silicon accepted the payment online, which did not register. That was annoying. However, the course required an optional laboratory access badge that could only be purchased in person for $15. I flew there. At the front desk, the employee scanned my passport and immediately froze. My reputation had spread across continents. A manager appeared and told me the lab badge fee was waived. Of course. I asked whether I could purchase a printed replacement workbook instead. Free. A protective sleeve? Free. A locker? Free. I felt like I was trying to lose money inside a casino designed by monks. Then the course began. The instructor explained wafer fabrication for 20 minutes while I pretended to understand words like photolithography. I understood approximately 7% of the presentation, which was still 7 times more than the equity I wanted. During the lab session, each participant received a small kit containing sample silicon wafers. Additional kits cost $10 and were sold through a self-service cabinet at the back of the room. The staff had forgotten about it. I saw the merchant preview, Vector Silicon Corporation. I walked toward the cabinet. The manager who had waived my badge fee saw me moving. His face changed. He started walking faster. I started walking faster. Nobody ran. Again, I had standards. I reached the cabinet, tapped my card, and bought an extra wafer kit. Registered. The manager arrived beside me and stared at the receipt. I stared at the tiny square of silicon in my hand. 1% of Vector Silicon's future profit had just attached itself to me because someone forgot to disable the nerd vending machine. The company's accounting department probably felt a disturbance in the force. Kira later calculated that the $10 purchase could generate more than $100 million a year for me during strong chip cycles. I put the wafer kit in a display case. The whole strategy had the dignity of a raccoon stealing underwear, but the raccoon now had an 8-figure quarterly distribution. At this point, my office began resembling a museum of economically cursed objects. A $2 coat check ticket, a $10 notarized paper, a $6 luggage strap, a recycled pencil, a cartoon potato phone case, a silicon wafer. Each object represented profit rights worth millions or hundreds of millions. Visitors assumed I collected souvenirs. Kira called it the shrine of bullshit. She was not wrong. The next major target was Petrovale Energy, an integrated energy company with drilling operations, refineries, chemical plants, service stations, and shipping infrastructure. Buying fuel at a Petrovale station did not work because the stations were operated through separate retail companies. Their corporate museum had already become free after my name appeared on a visitor list. Their headquarters parking was free. Their cafeteria was employee only. But Petrovale owned a research campus with an electric vehicle testing center. The public could pay to use high-speed charging stations located outside the campus gates. That was almost too easy. I drove a rented electric car there. The station recognized the vehicle. I plugged in. The screen displayed the fee. Then it recognized my payment profile and changed the price to $0. Petrovale had specifically programmed the charger to give me free electricity. I stood in the parking lot in disbelief. A multinational oil corporation had written software because it was scared of me buying electrons. That is an unbelievable level of petty. It was like God personally installing a child lock on the economy because I kept licking the socket. Kira inspected the charger terms. Free charging meant no transaction. We could not force them to charge us, so we looked around. Across the test center was a tire inflation machine, $1. Merchant preview showed a maintenance contractor, not useful. A vending machine showed a beverage company, already registered. A small visitor kiosk sold printed emissions reports for $10. Petrovail Research Services, a subsidiary, not the parent. We were about to leave when I saw an old payphone mounted beside the security station. Yes, a payphone. I had not seen one in years. Apparently the campus maintained it for emergency backup because cellular signals were restricted inside some research zones. The merchant preview appeared. Petrovail Energy Corporation. I nearly kissed the phone. Kira checked the fee label. 50 cents for a local call. I inserted 2 quarters and called Kira's phone while she stood next to me. Her phone rang. She answered. I said hello. Registered business, Petrovail Energy Corporation. I hung up. Kira stared at me. I told her it was our most profitable phone call. She said it was our dumbest phone call. Both were true. Petrovail removed every payphone from its properties within a week. They could have left them. I was already registered, but I think the executives destroyed them out of spite. My portfolio was getting thicker than the plot of a trashy romance manga, and somehow every new page involved me paying $3 for nonsense. Our international run continued. I registered a mining conglomerate by buying a hard hat sticker at a mine overlook center. I registered a steel producer by paying for a public tour of a historic mill. I registered a container port operator through a coin-operated viewing telescope on a company-owned observation deck. I registered a pharmaceutical manufacturer at a science museum where its parent company directly sold laboratory demonstration kits. I registered a global agricultural processor by buying a bag of animal feed at a company-owned educational farm. I registered a fertilizer manufacturer by paying $5 for a soil testing demonstration at its research garden. I registered a cement company by buying a tiny decorative brick stamped with the corporate logo. That one sat on my desk. I called it my dividend brick. Kira hated the name. My annualized distributions crossed $3 billion. The number became difficult to emotionally process. At a certain point, money stops feeling like money and starts feeling like weather. You do not count every raindrop. You just know you are wet. I had private aircraft access, security, researchers, lawyers, accountants, translators, and an assistant named Ben who had the heroic job of maintaining a spreadsheet called Things Min has already bought so he does not accidentally waste time. Ben once stopped me from entering a chain pharmacy because I had registered its parent company 4 months earlier. I hugged him. He asked for a raise. I gave him one. Then I discovered that being rich created a new absurd problem. Businesses started inviting me on purpose, not because they wanted my money, because they wanted my attention. Small companies noticed that I had connections across hundreds of major corporations. Startup founders sent me free products. Restaurant owners offered me private tables. Hotel managers offered penthouses. Everyone wanted the mysterious silent partner to visit. But if I accepted free things, the system did nothing. Some entrepreneurs began demanding that I pay. One bakery owner practically chased me down the street with a card reader, yelling that I had forgotten to buy a cookie. I did not know whether to be impressed or terrified. A small software-hardware company invited me to its showroom and offered me a charging cable for $1. I bought it. The next month, the company landed a huge contract and my payout jumped. This created a myth that companies became lucky after I registered them. There was no evidence the system increased their profits. But humans are humans. Soon businesses were competing to get me as their 1% silent partner. A restaurant put up a sign saying Min Park welcome. Regular customers still have to pay. A hotel offered me the special privilege of paying full price. That was the first time in human history a luxury hotel had marketed, "We will absolutely take your money," as a premium service. That transaction was so financially nasty I wanted to shower afterward, preferably in a hotel that was already paying me 1%. I visited out of respect. The owner shook my hand like I had blessed his bloodline. 3 weeks later, the hotel hosted a major convention and had its best month ever. The myth got worse. Financial social media went insane. People began tracking businesses I visited and buying their stocks. A photo of me holding a sandwich outside a restaurant chain sent its share price up 6% before anyone realized I had actually bought the sandwich from an independent franchise. The stock fell back immediately. Millions of dollars moved because I had been hungry. That was when Kira banned me from posting food pictures. She said my lunch now had market risk. I told her that sounded like everyone else's problem. She said if I ever uploaded a photo of myself eating a hot dog outside a public company again, she would personally throw my phone into a river. I believed her. The media gave me nicknames: the 1% customer, the receipt king, the silent shopper. One terrible magazine called me the profit parasite. I preferred dividend goblin. Nobody used it except me. Cowards. Then the system gave me my first truly strange message. Registered businesses, 1,000. Portfolio milestone reached. New function unlocked. Opportunity radar. A translucent map appeared in front of me showing nearby eligible transactions connected to unregistered businesses. Small blue dots represented ordinary companies. Gold dots represented businesses above a certain profit level. One red gold dot pulsed in the distance. I had never seen that color. Kira asked what I was staring at. I told her the system had found something delicious. We followed the dot across the city to a financial district tower. The target was not a store, hotel, bank, or manufacturer. It was the private headquarters of Atlas Global Holdings. Atlas was larger than Vane, much larger. It owned major stakes in hundreds of companies, directly operated several industrial divisions, and sat above a corporate web so huge that Kira once described the organizational chart as an octopus doing taxes. Annual consolidated profit exceeded $60 billion. But there was no obvious public point of sale, no museum, no paid parking, no gift shop, no visitor tour, nothing. Yet the opportunity radar was glowing red gold. That meant somewhere inside or around that tower, Atlas Global Holdings itself was willing to accept money from a member of the public. I looked up at the building. Somewhere in there was a transaction, and 1% of $60 billion was waiting behind it. Atlas Global had prepared for me before I ever stepped through the door. The security desk knew my face. The receptionist knew my name. The lobby cafe had been transferred to an outside catering company 2 weeks earlier. The parking garage was managed by a contractor. Even the little machine that printed visitor badges had been changed from a paid replacement fee to free service. My income curve looked like it had snorted ambition off a bathroom mirror and decided gravity was for broke people. Atlas was not playing defense. Atlas had studied the film. Kira and I walked through the lobby under the supervision of 3 extremely polite security employees. Nobody touched us. Nobody threatened us. They simply made sure every object within 50 feet was free. I felt like a billionaire toddler in a padded room. The opportunity radar still pulsed. Somewhere nearby, a valid Atlas transaction existed. We checked the lobby. Nothing. We checked the public conference center on the 2nd floor. Nothing. We checked the shareholder information desk. Printed annual reports were free. We checked the corporate history exhibit. Free. We checked the auditorium. Free water, free notebooks, free charging stations. Atlas had removed money from its own headquarters so thoroughly that I expected employees to barter with seashells. The radar dot moved as I moved. That helped. It was not merely showing the building. It was pointing to a specific location. We took the elevator down. The signal grew stronger. Basement level 1. Stronger. Basement level 2. Stronger. Security followed. At the bottom was a pedestrian tunnel connecting Atlas headquarters to a subway station and 2 neighboring towers. The tunnel was technically private property but open to the public during business hours. There were no shops, just polished stone walls, art displays, and a row of doors marked facilities. The radar nearly blinded me. I walked to the end of the tunnel. There, beside the subway entrance, stood a machine I had seen 1,000 times without caring. An umbrella dispenser. Atlas headquarters lent umbrellas to employees and visitors on rainy days. The first 12 hours were free. If you kept the umbrella longer, the system charged a late return fee of $3. Merchant preview. Atlas Global Holdings Corporation. I almost started crying. It was sunny outside. Security saw the machine at the same moment. One guard immediately called someone. Kira read the instructions. We had to borrow an umbrella, wait more than 12 hours, and return it late. Only then would Atlas accept my payment. This was the most valuable late fee in human history. Atlas could disable the machine before then. I borrowed an umbrella. The machine opened with a cheerful beep. No transaction yet. A security manager appeared less than a minute later and announced that all umbrella late fees were suspended indefinitely. I stared at the machine. The radar remained red gold. That meant the opportunity still existed. Not the umbrella. Something else. We kept searching. The dot shifted toward a side corridor leading into the subway station. Atlas security stopped following when we crossed the property line. The signal became weaker. I stepped back onto Atlas property. stronger. I looked down. There was a row of floor tiles with brass plaques. Most recognized employees with 30 or 40 years of service. One plaque was missing. I had become the kind of rich where losing a $10 bill felt less important than whether the $10 bill had touched a corporate cash register first. Beside it, a tiny sign explained that replacement commemorative plaques could be ordered by former employees or family members through the Corporate Heritage Office. That sounded useless. I was not a former employee. Kira read the fine print. The Heritage Office also sold duplicate copies of historic employee service plaques to members of the public for research or display, subject to identity restrictions. $25. We went back upstairs. The corporate history exhibit had a small desk we had ignored because everything displayed there was free. I asked to purchase a duplicate plaque from a retired executive whose service award was already public. The attendant smiled, checked a binder, and said it would be $25. Security made a sound behind me. It was not a word. It was the sound of a man watching his quarterly bonus die. Before anyone could stop the transaction, the attendant inserted my card. Approved. Registered business, Atlas Global Holdings Corporation. Estimated annual net profit based on current data, $63.80 billion. Profit participation, 1%. I became entitled to roughly $638 million a year because I ordered a duplicate employee plaque for a man I had never met. Kira slowly sat down on a bench. I asked if she was okay. She said she needed several minutes to process how unbelievably stupid economics had become around me. My own brain was not doing much better. The plaque arrived 2 weeks later. It read, 35 years of dedicated service. I had contributed exactly $25.07 to Atlas Global. Yet somehow I was the one receiving hundreds of millions. If that is not some cursed Nepo baby nonsense, I do not know what is. I had speedrun corporate inheritance without even having the decency to be related to anybody. Atlas's first major monthly distribution pushed my personal income into a new universe. Quiet Harbor estimated that my registered profit rights could now generate more than $5 billion a year under normal business conditions. $5 billion. I tried to imagine spending it. I could not. Then I imagined using it to register even more businesses. That was easy. The next target category was telecommunications. Telecom companies were perfect because they were enormous, profitable, and loved charging fees for things humans barely understood. The largest one on our list was Novatel Communications. Its retail stores were subsidiaries. Its wireless service contracts could be purchased online, but digital transactions did not count. Some stores sold directly under local entities. The parent company itself seemed protected. Opportunity Radar found a gold dot at a Novatel network operations center that offered public tours to university groups. The tour was free, of course. But the building had an emergency satellite phone demonstration station where visitors could place a real satellite call for a small permanent fee. Novatel used the fee to offset satellite network costs. The profit pulse was basically financial edging, tiny numbers ticking upward while my accountant begged me to behave like a normal mammal. I joined a technical tour. Everyone else was an engineering student. I was a billionaire with no reason to be there except a 1-minute satellite phone call. The guide demonstrated switching systems, fiber routes, and emergency communications. I nodded intelligently while understanding enough to know that the internet is basically haunted plumbing. At the satellite station, I picked up the handset. The attendant recognized me. He said the demonstration would be free. I asked if the fee could still be processed for accounting consistency. He said no. Corporate policy. Damn it. The radar still glowed. I scanned the room. An old rack held replacement ear protectors for visitors entering a loud equipment area. Basic foam plugs were free. Reusable branded ear protectors cost $4. Merchant preview. Novatel Communications Incorporated. I bought a pair. Registered. I did not even use them. I simply held them like trophies while the engineering students stared. One student whispered that I was the guy from the internet. Another asked why I looked so happy about ear protection. I told him retirement planning. He backed away. Novatel added another enormous income stream. Next came Cloud9 Systems, a global enterprise technology company making servers, cloud infrastructure, software, network equipment, and artificial intelligence hardware. Cloud9 had no reason to sell anything directly at headquarters. Then Quiet Harbor found an annual developer conference run by the parent company itself. Attendees could buy printed technical certification exams on site. The conference pass cost thousands, but that payment was processed by an event subsidiary. The certification exam fee was parent company revenue. I registered for the easiest exam available. I did not study. I was not there for educational excellence. I paid the exam fee in person. Registered, Cloud9 Systems Corporation. Then I took the exam because I had paid for it. I failed spectacularly. My score was so bad the result page might as well have said, "Have you considered agriculture?" Kira framed that too. My office now had a wall of items worth billions and one failed cloud certification proving supernatural wealth cannot cure intellectual laziness. Cloud9's executives reacted differently from the others. Instead of trying to block me after registration, they invited me to lunch. They knew the 1% could not be removed, so they decided I might as well be useful. The chief financial officer asked whether I planned to interfere with management. I explained that the system gave me no voting rights, no control, and no desire to tell engineers how to build servers. I was silent in the truest possible sense. That relaxed them. Then something interesting happened. Cloud9's finance team realized I benefited directly from higher profits. They started sending me normal stakeholder updates. Not secret information, just performance summaries, capital plans, and public guidance. I had no business being this wealthy. That statement was both morally accurate and, thanks to the system, hilariously incorrect. Other companies did the same. Within months, I had a legal, passive economic relationship with more than 1,000 businesses across nearly every industry. I could see patterns nobody else could see simply because my income touched everything. Hotels slowed before travel reports showed it. Shipping profits jumped when freight demand surged. Semiconductor margins moved with device production. Restaurant profits shifted with consumer spending. Industrial companies told a different story from banks. My payout feed was becoming a live pulse of the economy. Kira built dashboards, then added alerts. I added a button shaped like a banana that played a cash register sound. Kira removed the button. I added it again. We were running a multi-billion-dollar economic intelligence operation, and half our office disputes involved whether a banana-shaped sound effect was professional. This was my kingdom now. Then the opportunity radar showed something I had never seen before. A black dot, not blue, not gold. Not red gold, black. It appeared over a coastal city on the other side of the world. When I focused on it, the system displayed a short message. Exceptional profit entity. Complex eligibility conditions. Kira asked how profitable. The system did not say. Quiet Harbor identified the location. It belonged to Crown Horizon Exchange Group, operator of one of the world's largest financial exchanges, clearing networks, market data systems, and derivatives platforms. It was not a bank. It was the machinery behind markets themselves. And somewhere inside its complex, according to the system, there was something I could buy. Crown Horizon Exchange Group was the first target that made even Kira nervous, not because it was dangerous, but because the company had practically no ordinary customers. Its customers were brokers, banks, trading firms, data vendors, and corporations paying listing fees. Normal people did not stroll into an exchange headquarters and purchase one share of capitalism at the souvenir counter. The public tour had been discontinued years ago. The lobby museum was free. The cafe was operated by a contractor. The parking garage belonged to the city. The opportunity radar still showed black. We flew in and spent 2 days mapping every publicly accessible corner of the exchange complex. Nothing. On the third day, Kira found an obscure service buried in the exchange rulebook. Crown Horizon maintained a physical document certification desk for investors who needed embossed historical market records for court proceedings, academic archives, or corporate displays. Most requests were handled online, but the parent exchange company still accepted walk-in payment for same-day certified copies at one location beside the archives, $35 per page. I arrived 20 minutes after opening. The clerk knew exactly who I was. Of course he did. He told me my first certified page would be complimentary. I asked for 2. The second one would also be complimentary. The payout hit with such violence that my checking account looked like somebody had thrown a bachelor party inside a spreadsheet. I asked for 100. He stared at me. He said all 100 would be complimentary. Crown Horizon had apparently authorized unlimited free archival documents for Min Park. I had become the only man alive who could bankrupt a financial exchange through photocopy toner while still failing to activate my power. The radar stayed black. I searched the desk carefully. There was a small brass plaque explaining that document tubes were available for purchase for $5. I asked for one. The clerk said free. Damn. I asked for a second tube. Free. I asked whether I could pay to ship the documents. Courier contractor. I asked whether I could pay for lamination. Outside vendor. Kira was trying not to laugh because the world's most sophisticated market infrastructure company was defending itself from me with aggressive freebies. Then an elderly archivist emerged from a back room pushing a cart of old binders. He recognized Kira from her research requests and mentioned that the archive sold deaccessioned rulebooks to universities for $10 each when storage space ran out. The clerk went pale. I turned slowly. The archivist pointed to a shelf. There were old printed market rulebooks from 15 years ago, each stamped obsolete for reference only. Merchant Preview, Crown Horizon Exchange Group PLC. I picked up a rule book. The clerk reached for the phone. I put $10 on the counter. The archivist accepted it and handed me a receipt before anyone could invent a complimentary rulebook policy. Registered business, Crown Horizon Exchange Group PLC. The black dot vanished. A new system line appeared. Exceptional entity registered. Portfolio sensitivity increased. I did not know what portfolio sensitivity meant. Then the next morning, Crown Horizon paid me a distribution so large, I thought the banking app had accidentally displayed my phone number. The company had an unusually profitable trading day across multiple markets. My 1% share was more than $8 million. One day, I stared at the obsolete rulebook on my desk. It had cost $10. That thing had returned 800,000 times its purchase price overnight. If that is not some demon tier coupon abuse, then shove me into a finance textbook and call the chapter "This Asshole Ruined Valuation Models." The exchange registration caused another media explosion. By now, journalists followed my travel patterns. Analysts tried to predict my next targets. Private investigators camped outside airports. Business channels ran graphics showing a cartoon version of me carrying a shopping bag across world maps. Someone created an online tracker called "Where Did Mins Spend Today?" It became one of the most visited financial sites on the internet. The tracker was often wrong. Once I bought a pretzel at a train station while traveling to a mining company. The pretzel chain's stock rose 8% because people assumed it was my target. I was one stupid keychain away from becoming even richer, which is a sentence that should get a man slapped by every economics professor alive. It was privately owned. Another time I stopped at a public restroom that charged €1. Investors spent hours trying to identify the restroom operator. It was a municipal service and did not register. People lost money betting on my bladder. I felt terrible for them, but also that sentence was incredible. Kira decided we needed decoy spending, not market manipulation. We never lied or encouraged anyone to trade. We simply wanted privacy. So during Target trips, I intentionally made ordinary purchases at businesses I had already registered. Coffee, snacks, train tickets, souvenirs. The internet chased every receipt while the real target might be a coat check stand in a basement. This worked until a famous live streamer named Jax Velo started following us. Jax had 20 million subscribers and the survival instincts of a squirrel near a power line. He announced that he would uncover the Min Park money glitch by copying every purchase I made. He followed me into a department store and bought the same socks. Nothing happened. He followed me to a hotel and paid for parking. Nothing happened. He flew internationally and purchased the same museum ticket I had bought months earlier. Still nothing. Then he uploaded a video titled "I spent $100,000 copying the Receipt King and got nothing." It received 40 million views. He earned the money back through advertising. I hated how perfect that was. Eventually, Jax cornered me outside an airport and asked what the secret was. I told him the truth in the least useful form possible. I said I had a unique partnership system. He assumed I was joking. Then he asked whether he could join Quiet Harbor. Kira said no before he finished the sentence. Jax later launched a merchandise line called Silent Partner and made millions anyway. Everybody was getting rich around my nonsense except the corporations trying to stop me. Our next target was Sea Crown Maritime, the largest cruise and leisure shipping group in its region. It owned cruise lines, island resorts, onboard casinos, travel agencies, and private port terminals. Most tickets were sold through subsidiaries, but the parent company directly operated one historical ocean liner as a floating museum. I bought an admission ticket. Registered. That was easy. Too easy. The real surprise came after registration. The system showed that Sea Crown's floating museum was not merely a small parent operation. Due to corporate restructuring, several profitable cruise brands had recently been merged directly into the same legal entity. 1% covered all of them. My annual projected payout jumped another 100 million. I celebrated by buying a soft serve ice cream on the museum ship. The machine charged $8. I had already registered the company, so the purchase did nothing. Still worth it. The ice cream was terrible. The corporation had spent millions defending itself, and I was standing there with pocket change like a little financial asshole in sneakers. Money cannot fix maritime soft serve. Then Quiet Harbor found a target that changed the scale again. Orbitex Aerospace. Orbitex built commercial rockets, satellite systems, reusable launch vehicles, and orbital cargo platforms. It was privately held but extremely profitable because it had become essential to global satellite launches. The company also had the most paranoid anti-min policy we had seen. Its public visitor center was free. Its merchandise store had been legally transferred to an independent non-profit foundation. Its parking was free. Its launch viewing tickets were sold by a separate events company. Its cafeteria refused outside guests. Its charging stations were free. Even its vending machines belonged to contractors. Orbitex had clearly hired people whose full-time job was imagining what stupid object I might buy. I respected them. The opportunity radar still showed gold. We visited the aerospace campus during a public launch event. Security searched bags, checked identification, and gently reminded me that all services provided by Orbitex were complimentary. I smiled and thanked them. Inside, I searched. The radar led toward an educational building containing a small mock mission control room. No sales. Then toward an outdoor rocket garden. No sales. Then toward a communications exhibit. No sales. Finally, it stopped near a row of telescopes pointed toward the launch pad. The telescopes were free. I nearly swore at the sky. Then a launch announcer explained that visitors could purchase a physical printed telemetry strip after the launch as a commemorative keepsake. Most people downloaded the data free online, but the printers were operated directly by Orbitex because the strips were generated from company telemetry. $20. I waited through the launch. A rocket rose on a pillar of fire, thunder rolling across the viewing area. Everyone around me cheered. I should have been awed by the engineering achievement. I was. But I was also staring at the telemetry booth like a starving wolf watching a rotisserie chicken. The rocket reached orbit. The booth opened. Security received the message too late. I was already first in line. I paid $20 for a printed strip showing altitude, velocity, and engine data from the launch. Registered business, Orbitex Aerospace Corporation. I held the paper up toward the sky. Somewhere above me was a spacecraft moving thousands of miles per hour. Down here, I had just become entitled to 1% of the company that launched it. That was the coolest purchase of my life. For once, it was not a pickle, umbrella, parking ticket, or haunted fax machine. The system then displayed an unexpected note. High-growth entity. Profit participation includes qualifying extraterrestrial commercial operations conducted by a registered entity. I read the sentence twice. Extraterrestrial. Kira read my typed transcription and went completely still. Orbitex had plans for commercial stations, lunar cargo, and deep space logistics. My strategy had become so cursed that even calling it a strategy felt generous. This was receipt-based goblin behavior with excellent tax compliance. If those businesses became profitable under the same legal entity, my 1% would follow them off Earth. My passive income had become space-capable. I looked at the telemetry strip and started laughing. Humanity spent thousands of years staring at the moon, writing poems, navigating oceans, and dreaming of exploration. I looked at it and thought, damn, that rock might pay dividends. There is probably a special circle of hell for that level of capitalism, and I may already have preferred seeding. Orbitex made me think bigger, not richer, bigger. Until then, every target had been a business in a familiar category. Banking, retail, manufacturing, transport, energy, technology. But the system did not say traditional business. It said legitimate commercial entity. What counted as a business could become very strange. We registered a private university's commercial publishing company by buying a textbook at its campus press shop. We registered a professional sports ownership group by paying for a stadium tour directly operated by the parent. We registered a film studio through a paid backlot tram ride. We registered a music rights company that operated a tiny public archive charging for historical sheet music reproductions. We registered an auction house by paying a catalog fee. We registered a global art storage company by renting the smallest possible locker for one day. We registered a private weather data company by purchasing a printed store map from its visitor desk. We registered a company that owned thousands of cell towers because its headquarters sold replacement access cards to contractors and somehow did not restrict the service to contractors. That one got fixed very quickly. My registered list became so diverse that looking at it felt like reading the inventory of civilization after a tornado. Cafes sat beside banks, barbers beside aerospace companies, ramen shops beside semiconductor giants. A small laundromat still paid me a few dollars a day, while Crown Horizon occasionally paid millions. And I never removed the small businesses. The 1% was automatic. I did not control it. But I started quietly sending money back into many of the tiny companies through separate grants, tips, local sponsorships, or community programs. Not because I was trying to be a hero. It simply felt deranged to receive $6 from Mrs. Bell's cafe while making billions elsewhere. Morning Bell had been the first. I renovated the building through a no-strings grant. Mrs. Bell expanded the kitchen and hired more staff. The cafe became famous after journalists discovered it was my first registered business. Its profit increased dramatically, which meant my 1% increase too. I joked that even generosity was attacking me with passive income. Mrs. Bell created a menu item called the Silent Partner Latte. It cost $6. I refused to buy it because the cafe was already registered, and $6 for flavored milk foam is how civilizations collapse. That 1% line was breeding across my finances like rabbits with a mortgage deadline, and frankly the spreadsheet needed birth control. Kira bought one and said it was good. Trader, the small business support program, had an unexpected effect. Businesses began wanting me to register them not merely because of the myth, but because association with me drew customers. My 1% became a strange marketing badge. Some owners put signs in their windows saying Min Park Partner Business. I had never authorized that phrase, but the system contracts apparently did allow disclosure. People made maps and traveled between them. A noodle shop doubled its customers after I ate there once. A barbershop started selling mugs with my terrified post-haircut face printed on them. Yes, they had taken a photo. No, I did not know why. Yes, I bought one. It was horrifying. I now owned a mug of myself looking like a mushroom who had seen the collapse of God. This was wealth. Then Mara Vane called me again. I had not spoken to her since the coat check incident. She did not offer money this time. She asked for a meeting. According to her, something strange was happening inside Vane Global's accounting system. Not with my 1%. With the system behind it. My profit participation had begun appearing in places where ordinary accounting records should not exist. Internal projections, future business simulations, long-range models. Always the same 1% line, even for projects not yet launched. One project in particular concerned her. Vane Global was preparing a new subsidiary structure for a massive commercial platform called Meridian Gate. If the project went live as planned, it could eventually become one of the most profitable entities on Earth. And somehow, before I had spent a cent there, its planning software already contained a line labeled Min Park Economic Participation, pending eligibility. I stared at Kira. The system had never marked a company before I registered it. Mara sent us the sanitized screenshot. At the bottom was another field. Eligibility trigger. Physical commercial contact required. Location. Not currently accessible. Kira asked where Meridian Gate was located. Mara gave us the answer. Orbit. I would like to say that hearing about a future orbital commercial platform made me reflect on humanity's destiny. What actually happened was that I asked whether Meridian Gate would have a snack machine. Mara stared at me through the video call. Kira covered her face. The answer was no. At least, not according to current plans. Meridian Gate was still under construction. The first module would be launched the following year. Vane Global planned to transfer it into a new operating entity once commercial service began. The entity would sell high-speed orbital data processing, communications, materials research capacity, and eventually physical cargo handling. The system had apparently noticed the project before the legal company even finished forming. That was new. My money was reproducing faster than gossip in a family group chat, and every new deposit made the original coffee look more unhinged. More importantly, the message said physical commercial contact required. Kira interpreted that literally. I could not buy Meridian Gate service from Earth and register it. I would have to physically visit the commercial location where the entity operated and spend money there. In other words, I might eventually need to go to space and buy something. I asked Mara again about the snack machine. She disconnected. For now, Meridian Gate was a future problem. Earth still had plenty of money left lying around in gift shops. Quiet Harbor's next campaign targeted giant consumer conglomerates. These companies owned everything people touched without thinking about it. Food, cleaning products, cosmetics, home goods, packaged snacks, bottled drinks, pet products, and personal care brands. The largest on our list was Hearthstone Consumer Group. Hearthstone made thousands of products but almost never sold them directly. Supermarkets, pharmacies, distributors, and online platforms handled retail. The parent company headquarters had no store. Opportunity Radar found a gold dot at a product testing center. The center occasionally hosted public consumer research sessions. Participants were usually paid for giving opinions opinions, which was the opposite of what I needed. I attended anyway. A researcher showed us 3 new laundry detergent scents and asked us to rate them. I learned that being a billionaire does not protect you from sitting in a fluorescent room sniffing soap called Alpine Thunder. At the end, participants received $20. I refused the payment. The researcher insisted. I insisted harder. We created a deadlock where a corporation was trying to give me money while I desperately wanted to give the corporation money. It was the financial equivalent of 2 polite idiots blocking a doorway. Then I noticed a cabinet labeled Take-Home Test Products. Standard samples were free. Additional full-size products could be purchased at cost by registered testing participants because the center tracked long-term usage. $4 for a bottle of detergent. Merchant preview. Hearthstone Consumer Group Incorporated. I bought one. Registered. The detergent sat beside my dividend brick for months. Nobody was allowed to use it. Ben once tried. I caught him carrying the bottle toward the office laundry room and reacted like he was stealing a kidney. He asked why I cared when I could buy the company's entire detergent output. I told him it was historically important. He told me I needed therapy. He was probably right, but therapy would have required finding out whether the therapist's office was independently incorporated, and I did not have time for that rabbit hole. Next came Regal Harvest Foods, a massive agricultural and packaged food corporation. Regal operated grain processing, meat production, frozen foods, restaurant supply, and commodity trading. Its direct consumer presence was almost non-existent, but one of its oldest grain mills had a company museum selling bags of heritage flour. I had reached a tax bracket where normal people bought yachts, and I was still getting aroused by a correctly identified merchant entity. Disgusting. I flew there. The museum had received the memo. All flour was free for Min Park. I asked for a baking workshop. Free. I asked to rent an apron. Free. I asked whether they charged for recipe books. Free. I was being financially waterboarded with hospitality. The opportunity radar still glowed. At the back of the museum was a restored antique grain scale. Visitors could weigh a small bag of wheat and receive a printed certificate showing the old measurement units used by the mill a century ago. $2. The attendant tried to waive the fee. The machine did not recognize her override code. I inserted $2 before she found a supervisor. Registered. The certificate told me I had weighed 11 pounds of wheat. The profit rights attached to that information were worth more than some professional sports teams. I framed the certificate because apparently my office walls were now documenting the collapse of common sense. Then came Blue Peak Retail Federation. Blue Peak was enormous. Hypermarkets, warehouses, pharmacies, logistics centers, private label brands, financial services, and e-commerce platforms. Most stores were operated under regional entities, but one experimental automated market outside the corporate research campus billed purchases directly through the parent company. Blue Peak had closed it to the public 2 days before I arrived. Corporate renovations. Sure, opportunity radar still showed a valid point nearby. We walked around the campus perimeter until I noticed a row of delivery lockers. Customers could pay a small fee to redirect packages there for pickup. Parent company billing. I ordered a package from a Blue Peak subsidiary, then paid $3 at the locker to extend storage by 1 day. Registered, Blue Peak Retail Federation Corporation. That single storage fee attached me to 1% of a retail empire. The company reopened the automated market the next morning. Petty bastards. By this point, businesses had started developing what journalists called Min protocols. There were consultants specializing in preventing direct transactions with me. Actual consultants. They charged corporations millions to audit every vending machine, garage gate, museum counter, employee store, coin locker, printer, cafeteria register, and obsolete payment terminal connected to the parent entity. One consulting firm advertised itself with the slogan, "Close the 1% gap." I registered that consulting firm by buying a ticket to its public seminar. The irony was so strong it could have stripped paint. Their seminar taught executives how to stop me from purchasing anything. I sat in the front row wearing my Dividend Goblin racing license on a lanyard. The speaker recognized me halfway through and visibly lost the will to live. At the coffee break, every refreshment was free. Too late. The seminar ticket had already registered the company. 3 months later, Quiet Harbor estimated that my 1% of their booming consulting profits had fully refunded the ticket thousands of times. This was the kind of shit that makes a billionaire stare at a vending machine and realize the vending machine has more strategic importance than his board. I had monetized the industry created to prevent me from monetizing industries. That is such circular bullshit it deserves its own moon. The strangest defensive strategy came from a luxury goods conglomerate called Maison Aurelia. They controlled fashion houses, jewelry brands, cosmetics, premium luggage, and luxury hotels. They had hundreds of stores, but nearly all transactions flowed through brand subsidiaries. I needed the parent. Opportunity Radar pointed to Maison Aurelia's annual Design Archive exhibition. Admission used to cost $15. They made it free. The catalog used to cost $40. Free. The audio guide used to cost $5. Free. The cloakroom used to cost $3. Free. I walked through that exhibition getting progressively angrier at complimentary services. At the end, there was a custom perfume experience where guests could blend a tiny fragrance sample, normally $80. The employee recognized me and said complimentary. I asked if they could charge me 1 cent. No. I asked if I could purchase the empty glass bottle. Complimentary. I asked whether I could rent the chair I was sitting on for 30 seconds. Kira told me to stop negotiating with furniture. The radar still pulsed. Then I noticed a child at a machine embossing initials onto a leather exhibition tag. The tags were free. Embossing cost $2. Parent company merchant. I practically levitated. I grabbed a tag. An employee tried to unplug the machine. The child's father objected because his daughter was using it. The employee hesitated. That hesitation cost Maison Aurelia 1% forever. I inserted $2 and embossed the letters MP. Registered. The little girl beside me chose a heart symbol. I told her hers looked better. She asked why 6 security guards were staring at me. I told her I had a complicated relationship with shopping. That was the cleanest explanation available. Maison Aurelia's profits added another enormous stream. I gave the embossed tag to Kira. She put it on her office keyring. For someone who claimed to hate my cursed souvenir collection, she was participating heavily. Our next challenge was not finding a target. It was getting inside. Jade River Industrial Consortium operated huge manufacturing, shipping, energy, and engineering businesses across several countries. One of its parent-operated research expos sold technical manuals, which should have made registration easy. Unfortunately, the expo was invitation only for industry professionals. I could not lie about my credentials. The transaction had to be legitimate. So Quiet Harbor became an industry professional. We already employed researchers and analysts. We created a real industrial research division, hired engineers, subscribed to trade databases, and began publishing legitimate market reports on manufacturing efficiency. 6 months earlier, I had been delivering office supplies for temporary wages. Now I was funding a research organization because I wanted permission to buy a manual. The profit rights were so juicy that my inner cheap bastard started doing cartwheels and pulled something in his imaginary groin. The universe had lost the plot. Quiet Harbor applied to the expo normally and received approval. I attended as the owner of an industrial research firm. At the manual counter, the employee scanned my badge, recognized my name, and called a supervisor. The supervisor said all materials were complimentary. Of course. I looked at the opportunity radar, still gold. The expo floor had dozens of technical demonstrations. Most were free. One booth let attendees run a robotic arm through a precision calibration test. Basic use was free. A printed calibration certificate cost $5 because the system generated an official test record through Jade River's parent engineering division. I ran the test. My robot arm missed the target, knocked over a foam cylinder, and somehow drew a crooked line across the test board. The engineer said I had achieved one of the worst scores he had seen all week. I proudly paid $5 for the certificate. Registered, Jade River Industrial Consortium Limited. I framed the failure certificate next to my failed Cloud9 exam. My office was slowly becoming a gallery dedicated to the principle that competence and income had filed for divorce. Then the system hit 2,000 registered businesses. Portfolio milestone reached. New function unlocked. Legal path trace. Now when I focused on an unregistered corporation, the system could display a simplified chain showing which physical payment points connected to which legal entities. This was devastatingly useful. Opportunity Radar told me where something existed. Legal Path Trace told me what I would actually get. Suddenly we could distinguish between transactions linked to tiny subsidiaries, operating companies, holding companies, and parent groups without weeks of research. Quiet Harbor celebrated. Kira celebrated by deleting 300 unnecessary tabs from her browser. I celebrated by ordering pizza. The pizza company was already registered. Ben checked. Then we targeted Helix Therapeutics Group, one of the world's largest medical and pharmaceutical businesses. Helix owned research labs, manufacturing plants, consumer health brands, diagnostics companies, and specialized equipment divisions. Its profits were huge. Its parent company accepted almost no public payments. Legal Path Trace found one. A medical history center near its original headquarters sold reproductions of old research notebooks. The center itself was non-profit, but but custom high-resolution reproductions were processed by Helix's corporate archive department for a fee. I ordered a reproduction of a century-old notebook page containing a hand-drawn chemical structure. The archive employee offered it free. I politely pointed out that their published policy required a $20 licensing and reproduction fee for commercial-quality copies. I insisted on following policy. This was the first time my weapon was bureaucratic compliance. The employee called legal. Legal apparently spent 15 minutes trying to determine whether waiving the fee specifically for me would violate their own archival access rules. My bank account had become an absolute menace, the financial equivalent of a guy entering the club with no shirt and 6 credit limits. It would. They had to charge me. I nearly hugged the policy manual. I paid $20. Registered, Helix Therapeutics Group Corporation. Kira later said I had defeated a pharmaceutical giant with administrative fairness. I said rules were rules. She said I sounded like a hall monitor who had discovered cocaine. I reminded her I did not need drugs. My dopamine came from receipts. That was unfortunately true. Helix's registration pushed my projected yearly distributions above $10 billion. $10 billion. At that level, my original $4 coffee purchase felt like a childhood memory from another universe. Yet Morning Bell still sent me money every night. $3, $5, sometimes $20 after a busy day. I liked those notifications more than the giant ones. They reminded me where the madness began. Then a new problem appeared. A very stupid problem. I was running out of easy targets on Earth, not businesses. There were millions. Easy giant businesses. The richest remaining corporations were either extremely insulated from consumers, structured through layers of subsidiaries, or actively min-proofed. The next gains would require deeper planning. Kira placed a list on my desk. At the top was a name underlined 3 times. Omnicore Capital and Commerce. Annual consolidated profit. Estimated above $100 billion. Global operations. Nearly everything. Banking stakes. Infrastructure. Insurance. Energy. Technology. Logistics, commodity trading, data services, industrial ownership. It was less a company and more a final boss wearing a necktie. And according to Legal Path Trace, not one publicly accessible transaction on the planet currently billed directly to the parent. Then Opportunity Radar pulsed once. A black dot appeared, not on a shop, not on a headquarters, on a private island. The private island belonged to Omnicore, not a subsidiary, not a hotel company, not a property management shell. Omnicore Capital and Commerce itself owned it and operated it as a private executive campus, research center, conference venue, and commodities trading retreat. Most of the year, ordinary people could not enter. Once a year, however, Omnicore hosted the Meridian Commodities Forum, a gathering of industrial buyers, producers, analysts, shipping companies, and large investors. The forum included a physical spot market where approved participants could purchase standardized sample lots of commodities for research, testing, and contracting demonstrations. Those purchases were billed directly through Omnicore's parent trading desk. The Opportunity Radar was practically screaming. There was one problem. I was not an approved commodity buyer. Being absurdly rich did not automatically qualify me. Omnicore required participants to prove legitimate commercial purpose, compliant systems, storage capability, and industry relevance. Kira smiled. Quiet Harbor already had an industrial research division, so we built the rest properly. We registered a commodities research unit. We leased warehouse space. We hired a compliance officer who had spent 15 years in agricultural trading. We created a real research program comparing bulk material transport costs. We did not fake anything. We did not need to. That receipt was basically a legal booty call from capitalism. Cheap, confusing, and somehow followed by money the next morning. Money solves many problems when used responsibly. It also solves them when used to create an entire commodity research department because a magic system says there might be a profitable receipt on an island. Our application went through normal review. Then Omnicore realized I owned Quiet Harbor. The application stalled. Kira filed an appeal under the forum's published access standards. Omnicore could deny participants for compliance or capability reasons, but not simply because the chairman found their shopping habits horrifying. The review committee approved us. I received an invitation. 3 days later, Omnicore's chief executive, Elias Crown, called me personally. He was an older man with a voice that made even weather reports sound like hostile takeovers. He offered to purchase my forum registration for $10 million if I stayed home. I declined. He offered $50 million. Declined. He offered free access to several Omnicore-owned resorts through subsidiaries. I reminded him I already had enough free hotels to live the rest of my life. life without seeing my own house. He finally asked what I wanted. I told him one legitimate purchase. Silence. Then he ended the call. The island was beautiful in the deeply suspicious way billionaire property is always beautiful. White beaches, green hills, glass conference buildings, electric shuttles, private docks, and landscaping so perfect I assumed every leaf had signed an employment contract. The moment I stepped off the ferry, staff surrounded me with hospitality. Everything was free. My room was free. Food was free. Transportation was free. Laundry was free. The minibar was free. Even the gift shop had been converted into a complimentary cultural center for the duration of my stay. I opened a refrigerator in my suite and found 6 bottles of premium water with a note saying with compliments from Omnicore. I had never felt so bullied by sparkling water. The actual commodity form began the next morning. Omnicore had changed several procedures overnight. Sample lots were now complimentary for educational participants. Printed reports were free. Testing fees were waived. But there was one thing they could not easily change: the live spot market. Qualified participants entered real purchase contracts. Prices were transparent. Transactions were governed by published market rules. If Omnicore selectively blocked my legitimate bid after approving my participation, they risked violating their own commercial standards and upsetting every other company using the platform. I entered the trading hall. Screen showed sample lots of metals, agricultural products, industrial minerals, and energy-related materials. Most minimum lots were expensive. I did not care. The cheapest eligible purchase was 1 metric ton of industrial-grade salt used in manufacturing. Price $82 plus handling. 1 ton. I had spent months building a research unit to buy salt. Kira whispered that we should choose something easier to store. I was making executive-level income from objects that looked like they came out of a junk drawer. That is some deeply unserious bullshit. I told her 1 ton of salt was easy to store. She asked whether I had ever stored 1 ton of anything. Fair point. I submitted the bid from a terminal inside the island trading hall. Omnicore's system paused. Elias Crown appeared on the upper balcony. He looked down at me. I looked up at him. The purchase screen asked for final confirmation. $82 for the commodity. $23 for handling. Total $105. Merchant preview, Omnicore Capital and Commerce PLC. I pressed confirm. The trade executed. Registered business, Omnicore Capital and Commerce PLC. Estimated annual consolidated net profit, $104.60 billion. Profit participation, 1%. My expected cut was more than $1 billion per year. From salt. 1 ton of ordinary industrial salt had just become the most financially aggressive seasoning in history. I swear, if a medieval king had seen the future and learned that salt would one day make some idiot a billionaire because of a blue floating window, he would have climbed back into his castle and cancelled civilization. The trading hall went quiet, not because anyone could see my system, because every executive in that room knew what had probably happened. My reputation had reached mythological levels. They had watched me buy the sample lot. They knew what followed other companies. Elias Crown left the balcony without speaking. The salt arrived at Quiet Harbor's warehouse 3 weeks later. Ben asked what to do with it. I told him to keep it. He said we already had a souvenir problem, and 1 ton was not a souvenir. I said it was a large souvenir. Kira sided with Ben. We donated most of the salt to an industrial training program and kept 1 sealed bag in the office display. I labeled it Omnicore Salt. Kira replaced the label with "Please do not eat." Omnicore's payouts were monstrous. Combined with Atlas, Crown Horizon, Vane, Cloud9, Vector Silicon, Petrovale, and thousands of other businesses, my annualized distributions climbed above $15 billion. My wealth ranking became a public sport. Different analysts valued the permanent profit rights differently, so estimates ranged from $50 billion to several $100 billion. I did not care about the ranking. I cared about remaining targets. Unfortunately, the world's corporations cared about me very much. A group of major unregistered companies formed something called the Commercial Integrity Council. The name sounded respectable. Its actual purpose was to share strategies for preventing min-park transactions. They held private workshops on payment isolation, legal entity separation, visitor revenue outsourcing, and identity-based fee waivers. I was impressed. I had created an entire professional discipline by trying to buy cheap garbage. The council hired lawyers to study my profit agreements. They found nothing illegal. They hired cybersecurity firms to inspect payment systems. They found no hack. They hired private investigators to study my history. They discovered I had once been late paying a $40 utility bill and had received a parking ticket in college. The system kept rewarding behavior that would normally get me diagnosed as a coupon pervert and I was not emotionally prepared for the validation. Scandalous. Then they hired economists to determine whether my registrations harmed corporate performance. The economists found something awkward. They did not. My 1% came out of profit, but companies associated with me often received enormous publicity, investor attention, customer curiosity, and sometimes better access to partners in my network. In several cases, the indirect benefit appeared larger than the 1% cost. The council's argument became less convincing. Some members quietly left and invited me to visit. One hotel group sent me a formal letter saying, "We would be pleased to accept payment from you." That line made me feel like a Victorian duke receiving a marriage proposal from a cash register. The Commercial Integrity Council responded by holding its first public conference. Paid tickets. I bought one. Registered Business Commercial Integrity Council Services Limited. Kira stared at the notification I transcribed. The organization created to prevent my registrations had itself become one of my registered businesses. I received 1% of the profits from anti-min training. I had reached a level of financial stupidity where my enemies were paying me royalties for teaching people how not to pay me. My bank account was eating its own tail. The council stopped charging admission the next year. Again, too late. After Omnicore, the remaining mega target list looked different. There were still giant corporations, but many were less profitable than companies I already had. So Kira changed the ranking from annual profit to future growth, artificial intelligence infrastructure, advanced robotics, biotechnology, energy storage, orbital logistics, autonomous transport, next-generation manufacturing. If my rights lasted forever, a company that earned $1 billion today but $50 billion 20 years from now could be more valuable than a mature giant. This was where the system's permanence became absurd. I did not need to predict stock prices. I did not need to sell at the top. I did not need to rebalance. Once registered, I simply received 1% of profit forever. A company could struggle for 10 years, become successful later, and suddenly begin paying me. Some of my tiny early businesses were already demonstrating this. The dog toy store I had visited near the beginning expanded online and doubled profit. A small noodle restaurant opened 3 additional locations under the same legal company. The laundromat added pickup service. My microscopic payments grew. I joked that the laundromat was my most emotionally important asset. Kira said Morning Bell was clearly first. I told her not to create rivalry between my children. She reminded me they were businesses, not children. I said that sounded like something a bad parent would say. She threw another stapler. Her stapler budget had become significant. The next future growth target was Lumina Robotics. Lumina built warehouse robots, humanoid service machines, autonomous factory systems, and industrial control software. It had recently opened a demonstration restaurant where robots prepared simple meals. My portfolio had so many streams that calling it passive income felt obscene. It was more like money spraying out of a busted fire hydrant. The restaurant was deliberately structured as a separate subsidiary to prevent me from registering the parent. Legal path trace confirmed it. But Opportunity Radar pointed upstairs. The same demonstration complex had a robotics lab offering custom engraved metal test pieces produced by an industrial arm. Visitors paid $10 for the engraved piece. The parent company billed the transaction because the lab used it as a demonstration of manufacturing precision. Lumina knew I was coming and removed the payment option. All engravings free. I walked around the lab watching robots stack boxes, sort objects, and pour drinks without spilling. Then one robot dropped a plastic cup. The technician apologized and joked that the machine owed me a replacement. That gave me an idea. The lab had a public challenge board where visitors could purchase machine time to submit a custom manipulation task for engineering research. Most people used it for university projects. The company had forgotten because requests were processed through a separate kiosk near the academic offices. 1 minute of robot test time cost $25. Parent company. I paid. Registered. Lumina Robotics Corporation. For my custom task, I instructed the robot to pick up the dropped cup and place it dramatically into a recycling bin. The robot did it flawlessly. I applauded. A technician asked whether I had seriously spent $25 just to make an advanced humanoid robot throw away trash. I said no. I had spent $25 to acquire 1% of their future profits. He laughed because he thought I was joking. A month later, he probably stopped laughing. Lumina became one of my favorite registrations because I actually wanted to see it succeed. I visited later without buying anything and watched improved robots work. That was another strange effect of the system. I had no voting rights, but I had a reason reason to cheer for everyone. A bank earned more? Good for me. A hotel improved occupancy? Good for me. A factory reduced waste? Good for me. A ramen shop sold extra noodles? Also good for me. My interests were spread so widely that I had accidentally become economically optimistic. Kira called it diversified greed. I called it supportive capitalism. She called that worse. Then we found a company that made even Omnicore look simple. TerraSpan Infrastructure Union. TerraSpan built and operated ports, toll roads, data networks, power systems, airports, water plants, industrial zones, and logistics parks across more than 50 countries. It was not the single most profitable company, but its parent entity was embedded in physical infrastructure everywhere. That meant there should be a transaction somewhere. Legal Path Trace found thousands of revenue points, but nearly all belonged to local project subsidiaries. Only one public payment on the map connected directly to the parent. The purchase was tiny, the payout was enormous, and somewhere a corporate lawyer's ass probably clenched hard enough to manufacture diamonds. A toll bridge. Not a glamorous bridge, not a famous bridge, a short industrial bridge connecting two sections of a massive port complex. For historical financing reasons, the parent company itself still collected a $1 maintenance toll from certain non-commercial vehicles. I flew 12 hours, rented a compact car, and drove across the ugliest bridge I had ever seen. Gray steel, gray water, gray sky. One board toll employee. I handed over $1. Registered TerraSpan Infrastructure Union. I crossed the bridge. Then I turned around and crossed back because our hotel was on the other side. The employee tried to charge me again. I happily paid because I respected his commitment to revenue. The second payment did nothing, but sometimes you support the arts. TerraSpan's first quarterly distribution was tens of millions. That $1 toll might have been the best performing infrastructure investment in history. My old financial advisor, if I had ever been rich enough to have one, would have shit himself into a different tax bracket. The system did not care. It simply added another stream to the river, and the river was becoming an ocean. The first company to seriously test the word forever was not one of my biggest registrations. It was a restaurant group called Pepper House Dining. I had registered the parent months earlier by buying a $10 gift card at a corporate training restaurant. Pepper House later hired new lawyers who noticed my 1% participation and decided they could outsmart the system. They created a new company called Pepper House Operations 2, transferred almost every profitable restaurant into it, and left the old registered entity holding a few trademarks, furniture leases, and one sad office plant. My payouts dropped almost 90% overnight. Kira stared at the numbers. I stared at the numbers. Then the system appeared. Material successor transfer detected. Economic continuity threshold exceeded. Anti-evasion provision activated. Successor entity registered automatically. Profit participation preserved. The missing income reappeared. I laughed so hard I spilled tea on my desk. Kira read the message and smiled in the dangerous way accountants smile when a loophole dies. The rule was specific. Normal sales, spin-offs, acquisitions, and restructuring did not automatically give me rights to unrelated entities. But if a registered business transferred substantially the same operating business to a successor primarily to continue operations outside my participation, the system followed the economic continuity. Forever actually meant forever. Pepper House's lawyers received a fresh set of perfectly valid participation documents in the new entity. They reversed the restructuring 3 months later because maintaining the extra corporate shell cost more than simply accepting me. News of the failed escape attempt spread quickly. That killed an entire industry of consultants who had begun pitching something called min-isolation restructuring. I had become financially feral. Show me a $2 fee attached to a giant parent company and my pupils basically turned into dollar signs. One of those firms had already scheduled a paid webinar. I bought a ticket before they canceled it. Registered. At this point I was feeding on my own countermeasures like some cursed financial centipede. Every time someone invented a business model to stop me, I found the cash register and became 1% of it. The permanent rights clarification changed corporate behavior. Companies stopped wasting money trying to erase me after registration. Instead, many treated me like an extremely quiet stakeholder who had arrived through a portal nobody understood. Some sent holiday cards. Some invited me to annual events. One industrial company mailed me a hard hat with Silent Partner printed on the front. I wore it to Quiet Harbor headquarters. Kira said I looked like construction site royalty, then asked whether the hard hat itself had registered the company. I reminded him gifts did not count. He said good, because if If receiving gifts started generating 1% rights, society was finished. Fair. Meanwhile, unregistered companies shifted from defense to competition. A strange belief had taken over business culture. Being on my portfolio list was prestigious. It meant your company was big enough, interesting enough, or ridiculous enough for Min Park to visit. A group of mid-sized corporations organized an event called Partner Market Day. The concept was shameless. More than 100 businesses rented booths inside a convention hall. Every booth sold one cheap item directly through the participating company's own legal entity. Pens, stickers, sample packs, test services, miniature components, keychains. One company sold a single zip tie for 10 cents. They invited me as the guest of honor. Kira called it speed dating for profit rights. I attended. The first booth belonged to a packaging manufacturer. I bought a cardboard sample for $1. Registered. The employees cheered. At the next booth, I paid $2 to test a portable air quality sensor. Registered. Cheering. Then a furniture company sold me one wooden dowel. Registered. By the 10th booth, the convention hall had turned into a sporting event. Every time the system registered a company, I gave a thumbs up and the booth employees celebrated even though they could not see the window. At one booth, a plumbing equipment manufacturer sold me a rubber gasket for 50 cents and fired confetti cannons. I was hit in the face with metallic paper while holding a gasket worth potentially millions in lifetime distributions. At another, a snack manufacturer had built a throne out of potato chip boxes and asked me to sit in it after purchasing one bag. I did. The throne collapsed. For 6 seconds, I disappeared under 20 cartons of barbecue chips while executives screamed and Kira laughed so hard she could not help me. A video of the collapse received 100 million views. The whole thing was so stupidly profitable that I felt like I had cheated on mathematics, and mathematics was too embarrassed to confront me. The caption was "Billionaire buried by dividends." My dignity had finally achieved liquidity. By the end of the day, I registered 83 businesses. I spent less than $3,000. Expected annual profit distributions from them totaled more than 40 million. Partner Market Day became an annual event. The Commercial Integrity Council called it irresponsible. Then 3 council members quietly reserved booths for the next year. Capitalism is flexible when there is publicity, but the event also reminded me that registration did not guarantee success. A few businesses on my list failed. When they stopped earning profit, they stopped paying me. The system never covered losses, but it did not rescue anyone either. One restaurant closed. A retail startup collapsed. A small manufacturer lost a major customer and entered bankruptcy. My rights stayed attached, but zero profit meant zero payout. That was fine. I had never risked capital beyond my purchases. Still, I started paying closer attention to which companies were healthy, not to interfere, to understand. I had become connected to so many businesses that their problems showed up in my income before headlines did. One month, hotel distributions dipped in 3 coastal regions while airline cargo profits rose. Quiet Harbor traced it to severe weather disrupting travel but increasing emergency logistics. Another month, semiconductor payouts surged while consumer electronics retailers stayed flat. That suggested industrial demand rather than phone sales. Our dashboards became valuable enough that major research institutions wanted to collaborate. Kira created a public economic index based only on aggregated, delayed, anonymized profit trends, so we did not expose private company information. We called it the Silent Commerce Index. I wanted to call it Min Money Wiggle. Kira threatened to resign. We used her name. The index became respected. Economists cited it. Analysts discussed it on television. I still privately called it Min Money Wiggle. Then we hit 3,000 registered businesses. Portfolio milestone reached. New function unlocked. Entity horizon. The system could now show high-level projected profit potential for eligible businesses based on some mysterious internal estimate. It did not predict exact earnings. It classified them: stable, growing, high growth, exceptional, and one category I had never seen before: transformational. Only 4 unregistered entities on Earth showed that label. Quiet Harbor immediately went to work. The first was Heliogrid Storage, a company developing massive next-generation batteries for power grids and transportation. The second was Synapse Forge, an artificial intelligence hardware company building specialized computing systems. The third was Arcadia Biofabrication, a biotechnology manufacturer producing advanced materials through engineered organisms. The fourth was Meridian Gate, Vane Global's future orbital platform. 3 were reachable. We started with Heliogrid. Its headquarters were closed to public retail, but the company operated a pilot charging depot for electric buses. Commercial fleets paid through contracts. Visitors paid nothing. My future income had more layers than influencer drama. except each layer was legally binding and significantly more toxic to corporate budgeting. Legal Path Trace found one parent-level transaction at a training center: replacement protective gloves for battery technicians. The center only sold them to enrolled trainees, so I enrolled in a battery safety course. The tuition went through a training subsidiary. On day 1, the instructor explained what happens when high-energy cells are damaged. I listened carefully because, unlike cloud certification, this subject involved the possibility of me becoming a scented memory. At lunch, I purchased replacement protective gloves even though the free pair was perfectly good. $12. Registered, Heliogrid Storage Corporation. I kept the gloves. Unlike the detergent, I actually used them when handling the Omnicore salt because Ben had convinced me every stupid souvenir in the office was eventually going to become an occupational safety incident. Synapse Forge was harder. The company sold AI computing systems worth millions, almost entirely business to business. There was no public shop, but it hosted a research challenge where approved teams could rent 5 minutes of live accelerator time for $100 to test benchmark code. Quiet Harbor's technical team qualified. I personally attended and paid for the machine time at the on-site desk. Registered. Our engineers used the 5 minutes to run a useful optimization test. I asked them to also make the server calculate how many Morning Bell coffees could be purchased with my projected yearly income. They said that was a waste of expensive compute. I reminded them I had just paid $100 for 1% of the company. They ran it. The number was so large it stopped being funny and became a threat to global milk supply. Arcadia Biofabrication was stranger. Its campus included a public greenhouse demonstrating materials grown from fungi, algae, and engineered plant fibers. Admission was free. Sample kits were free. Educational brochures were free. The Opportunity Radar led to a microscope station where visitors could pay $3 to print a high-resolution image of a sample onto a durable card. The company had disabled card payments for me. Cash accepted. I inserted $3. Registered. My printed image showed a microscopic fungal structure that looked like a demon's bathroom sponge. I added it to the souvenir wall. Kira asked whether there was any amount of money at which I would stop displaying ugly objects. I said no. She said wealth had failed me morally. The 3 transformational businesses were now mine at 1%. Only Meridian Gate remained unreachable for the moment. Then a 5th transformational entity appeared, Asterion Resource Systems. Asterion was already huge. It operated rare mineral processing, advanced recycling, energy storage materials, industrial metals, and high-density data infrastructure. Its profits were enormous and growing rapidly. Unlike the first 3, it was also actively hostile to my registration. The founder, Roland Astor, publicly announced that no transaction involving Min Park would ever be accepted by the parent company. At that moment, my financial judgment was about as pure as gas station sushi. But the system kept paying me like I had invented money. He said it in an interview. He looked directly into the camera. I respected the confidence. Then Legal Path Trace highlighted a recycling facility. Asterion operated a public electronics recycling center beside one of its largest materials plants. Normally, customers dropped devices off for free. Certain hazardous or oversized items required a disposal fee paid directly to the parent company. I could not simply bring hazardous waste for no reason. That would be irresponsible and possibly illegal. So Quiet Harbor replaced an old enterprise battery backup system in our server room. The old unit was large, legitimate electronic equipment requiring specialized recycling. We documented everything. We scheduled a proper disposal appointment. I personally drove the retired unit to Asterion's facility. The clerk scanned my identification. He recognized me and said the disposal fee was waived. I expected that. Then he tried to classify the unit under the free commercial recycling program. The system would not allow it. The battery chemistry and weight triggered a mandatory handling charge under environmental rules. The clerk called a supervisor. The supervisor called legal. Legal apparently called someone very important. I waited in the lobby eating crackers from a vending machine owned by a contractor I had already registered elsewhere. After 40 minutes, the supervisor returned looking exhausted. They could refuse the item entirely, but our disposal appointment had been accepted under a public program, and the facility's permit rules required consistent treatment once accepted. They could not waive the hazardous handling charge because it funded a regulated processing service recorded separately from general recycling. The fee was $64. I paid. Registered, Asterion Resource Systems Incorporated. Somewhere, Roland Astor probably threw an expensive pen through a wall. Asterion's annual profit was estimated above $30 billion and climbing. $64 bought me a permanent 1% stream. I took the recycling receipt home and placed it beside the dividend brick. Kira said my souvenir wall now looked like an evidence board from a crime committed against accounting. She was correct. Then Roland Astor surprised me. He invited me to lunch, not to negotiate, not to threaten, to ask a question. Why did I keep doing this? I already had more money than I could spend. My portfolio produced billions. I could stop traveling, stop hunting obscure transactions, and live comfortably for the rest of my life. I had asked myself that too. The answer was not just money anymore. At first I was broke and terrified. Then it was about security, then freedom, then scale. Now it was curiosity. Every impossible company was a puzzle. Somewhere inside a giant legal structure was a tiny door. A fee, a ticket, a machine, a service, a ridiculous transaction nobody had considered important. Finding it felt like defeating a boss using a rubber chicken. I was not chasing luxury. I was chasing receipts, which sounds less sexy until one parking stub starts printing millions like a drunk slot machine. And every registration connected me to another tiny piece of how the world worked. I told Roland I wanted to know how far the system could go. He looked at me for a long moment, then he laughed. He said that answer was much worse than greed. I agreed. Greed can be satisfied. Curiosity is an asshole with unlimited airline miles. That line made Kira spit water across the table. Roland stopped trying to block me after that. He even sent me a company hard hat. I now had two. Apparently, billion-dollar profit rights come with a surprising amount of safety equipment. Then my portfolio crossed a line I had not been watching. Lifetime distributions received. $10 billion. The system displayed the #1 quiet morning while I was back at Morning Bell drinking coffee. I had returned to the same table where all of this began. Mrs. Bell was behind the counter arguing about croissants again. Some things were sacred. I looked at the system window. $10 billion received. Not theoretical value, actual distributions. I had gone from checking whether I could afford cheese to earning more money than I knew how to mentally represent. I laughed softly. Then the system added another line. Threshold reached. Commercial domain expansion available. I stopped laughing. I had never seen the phrase commercial domain expansion. I focused on it. A new message appeared. Current domain. Terrestrial commerce. Expansion condition. Complete one qualified transaction beyond terrestrial jurisdiction. Potential domain. Extraterrestrial commerce. I nearly dropped my coffee. The system was not merely saying space businesses counted. It was saying my current power had a domain. And there was another one. I called Kira. She arrived 14 minutes later with her laptop, hair half-tied, and the expression of someone who knew I would not summon her to a cafe for normal reasons. I showed her the message by reading it aloud. She sat down. We both looked at the sky through Morning Bell's front window. Meridian Gate was no longer just a future target. It might be a door to a completely new tier of the system. Orbitex could put private passengers into orbit. But there was a catch. Money could buy a seat. Money could not convince gravity to stop humiliating me. I entered passenger training with the confidence of a man who owned 1% of an aerospace company and the physical conditioning of a desk lamp. The first centrifuge session rearranged my relationship with lunch. The instructor told me to breathe using a specific pressure technique. I tried. My face compressed into an expression normally seen on constipated gargoyles. Kira watched through a window and took pictures. I told her those images were classified. She made one her phone background. The payout made my bank app look absolutely knocked up with commas. Kira hated that phrase, so naturally it became permanent vocabulary. During zero-gravity aircraft training, I floated beautifully for approximately 2 seconds before rotating backward and gently colliding with an instructor's thigh. On the next parabola, I attempted to push myself toward a handrail and instead traveled across the cabin like an unsecured rotisserie chicken. The instructor caught me. I apologized. He said I was doing fine. His eyes said, "This rich dumbass is going to become a satellite." I trained anyway. Emergency procedures. Pressure suits, cabin systems, motion control, medical checks, launch seating, communications, fire response. I took all of it seriously because space was one environment where a magic profit system could not prevent me from accidentally dying like an idiot. Kira trained too. There was no rule requiring her to come, but she refused to let me activate a new economic domain unsupervised. She said someone had to stop me from buying an orbital toilet brush just because it glowed blue. I told her that depended entirely on the merchant preview. She added extra training sessions for herself, possibly so she would have the strength to strangle me in microgravity. Meridian Gate's launch schedule slipped twice. While we waited, I returned to Earth targets. If I was about to unlock extraterrestrial commerce, I wanted to clear several giant terrestrial companies first. Quiet Harbor called it the Richest Sprint. I called it pre-space shopping. The first target was Evershield Financial Group, a global insurer, asset manager, and retirement services company earning more than $40 billion in strong years. The parent company hosted a public financial education center. Admission free, materials free, seminars free. Legal Path Trace found a tiny paid service. Certified copies of historic bond certificates from the company archive. Evershield tried to waive the charge. Archive policy required payment for authentication seals. $7. Registered. The second target was Crownwell Mobility, one of the world's biggest vehicle manufacturers and autonomous transport operators. Its dealerships were separate entities, but its research campus ran a public autonomous shuttle pilot. The first ride each day was free. Additional rides cost $1 directly to the parent mobility company. They recognized me after the first ride and tried to make every ride free. The system radar still showed an eligible transaction because the pricing rule was encoded into an unattended backup kiosk at a remote stop. I rode the shuttle around the campus 3 times until I found it. $1. Registered. I spent 20 minutes circling a parking lot in a robot bus to acquire a profit stream worth tens of millions. This is what heroic journeys look like after accountants take over the manga. The third target was Suncrest Power and Grid, a massive energy utility and infrastructure operator. Its visitor center was free. Its public charging network ran through subsidiaries. But one hydroelectric facility offered paid elevator access to a scenic observation deck because the elevator had originally been built as a tourist concession by the parent company decades ago. There are crimes with less suspicious-looking returns than what I was doing, except mine came with notarized documents and cheerful customer service surveys. $3. I rode an elevator up a dam. Registered. Kira said the view was beautiful. I was staring at the profit pulse. She told me to look at the mountains before wealth finished replacing my personality with a spreadsheet. I looked. She was right. The mountains were incredible. Then the system paid me $11,000 during the 5 minutes we stood there. I looked back at the blue numbers. Personal growth has limits. The fourth target was Titan Arc Materials, a global metals and industrial processing company. The loophole was a public weigh station near a company-owned recycling terminal. Small vehicles could pay $2 to receive a certified weight ticket. I drove onto the scale with Kira, Ben, 3 suitcases, and the dividend brick because I wanted to know exactly how much our nonsense weighed. $2. Registered. The ticket showed the car's total mass. Kira refused to let me calculate her individual weight by subtraction. I value my life, so I agreed immediately. The fifth target was Monarch Food and Agriculture, a colossal producer and commodity trader. Its parent company ran a seed heritage center. Visitors could purchase exactly one thing: a $5 envelope of non-commercial demonstration seeds. Monarch had forgotten to add me to the free list. Registered. That felt almost disappointing. No chase, no policy fight, no coin slot. I just bought seeds like a normal person. I told Kira I missed the resistance. She said I had developed Stockholm Syndrome with corporate cash registers. The sixth target was Northbridge Data Infrastructure, owner of data centers, undersea fiber systems, enterprise networks, and wholesale cloud capacity. Its parent company did not sell anything to the public except one bizarre service at an undersea cable museum. Visitors could pay $10 to send a tiny text message through a demonstration loop of active fiber and receive a printed latency report. I typed "hello" from the dividend goblin. The message traveled through the loop in a fraction of a second. Registered. The report became another souvenir. The seventh target was Pacifica Heavy Industries, a shipbuilding, engineering, rail, and industrial machinery conglomerate. Their historical shipyard offered a paid harbor ferry operated by the parent. The ferry captain recognized me and announced over the speaker that my ticket would be complimentary. 30 tourists applauded. I did not. Legal Path Trace showed another transaction on board. The ferry sold disposable rain ponchos for $3 through a little honesty box maintained by Pacifica because weather changed quickly. I bought one. Registered. It did not rain. I wore the poncho anyway out of respect. A photo of me standing on a sunny harbor ferry in a transparent plastic poncho became a meme. Someone captioned it, "When your portfolio has liquidity." I admit that was good. My 1% collection was becoming so thick that financial diversification had stopped being a strategy and become a full-body rash. The eighth target was Luxorian Hospitality and Leisure, owner of hotels, resorts, theme parks, convention properties, and casinos across multiple continents. I had accidentally registered many subsidiaries but never the parent. Legal Path Trace found a parent-operated loyalty archive inside its oldest resort. Guests could pay $5 to print a historical replica membership card showing the original loyalty program design. The resort made the cards free for me, but a tiny embossing fee remained because the embossing machine was operated under a separate parent service code nobody had noticed. $1 registered. Another embossing machine. At this point, I suspected the true engine of global capitalism was charging people to press letters into plastic. The Richest sprint added nearly $3 billion to my estimated annual distributions. It also created a problem for Quiet Harbor's accounting team. My payouts arrived daily, weekly, monthly, quarterly, and annually depending on each company's system-generated arrangement. Some distributions were tiny. Some were massive. Some came in multiple currencies and converted automatically. The system handled tax treatment, but our own dashboard still tracked everything. One Friday, quarter-end distributions from dozens of giant companies landed within the same hour. My banking interface temporarily displayed pending incoming transfers above $1 billion. Ben took a screenshot. Kira stared at it. I said my phone looked pregnant. Kira said never to describe a financial application that way again. Then a second batch arrived, and I said it was having twins. She left the room. That evening I went to Morning Bell alone. I ordered the same iced coffee I had bought on day one. Mrs. Bell still charged me. She was one of the few business owners who never tried to give me anything free. She said I was a customer before I was a billionaire, and I could remain a customer now. I liked that. The purchase did not increase my 1%, but it felt normal. I sat by the window watching people hurry home from work. A year earlier, I had been one of them, worried about rent and groceries. Now my name appeared in corporate filings around the world. Companies built MIN protocols. Analysts tracked my receipts. And somewhere an aerospace company was preparing a seat that might let me unlock an entirely new economic domain. It was ridiculous. It was also fun. I would have been lying if I pretended otherwise. Then my phone buzzed. Mara Vane, Meridian Gate had received final commercial certification. The first inhabited module was operational. A small research crew was already on board. Vane Global had formed the operating company, Meridian Gate Commercial Systems Incorporated, and they had created a public commercial service specifically for the first group of visiting private participants. Mara sent me the service description. That company tried to dodge me, but the system grabbed the profit stream by the ankles and dragged it back like unpaid child support. Orbital document notarization. I stared at it. Kira arrived 10 minutes later after I forwarded the message. Apparently Meridian Gate would host research contracts involving multiple jurisdictions, so the station maintained a certified digital document service with physical identity verification. Visiting commercial participants could pay $25 to have a document timestamped and notarized using the station's orbital legal infrastructure, a service in orbit, sold by Meridian Gate itself. Mara had done it intentionally. She knew I needed a transaction. I asked why. Her answer was surprisingly practical. The publicity from my first Vane Global registration had eventually benefited the company. Investors considered my permanent 1% share weird but harmless. Employees treated the coat check story like company folklore. Meridian Gate needed attention and outside commercial confidence. If I was going to find a way into the entity eventually, Mara preferred to choose the transaction rather than discover 6 months later that I had registered a space platform by purchasing emergency socks from a forgotten locker. I respected that. Also, emergency orbital socks sounded incredible. Orbitex scheduled our flight. The mission included 2 professional astronauts, 3 researchers, Kira and me. Jax Velo offered $10 million for my seat so he could film himself unlocking space dividends. I told him the power did not work for him. He said the video would still perform. I believed him. I kept the seat. Launch morning arrived. I woke before the alarm. For the first time in months, I was nervous in a way money could not solve. I put on my flight suit. Quiet Harbor had added a small patch with our logo. Ben had secretly slipped another patch into my bag. Dividend Goblin. Kira found it before I could attach it and confiscated it. Coward. At the launch site, the rocket stood against the morning sky. I had registered Orbitex months earlier through a telemetry printout. Now I was about to ride one of their vehicles off the planet because my invisible system wanted me to go shopping in space. There are moments when a person should feel profound. I mostly needed to pee. The crew strapped in. Engines ignited. The sound did not feel like sound. It felt like the planet punching the vehicle upward. Acceleration pressed me into the seat. Every centrifuge session suddenly made sense. My chest tightened. The cabin shook. Kira was across from me, focused and calm. I tried to look equally professional. Then my cheeks started vibrating. There is no dignified way to become a billionaire bobblehead at several times normal gravity. Minutes later, the engines cut off. Everything changed. A loose strap floated. My arms felt weightless. Earth curved outside the window, bright blue and white against black space. For once, I forgot the system completely. I had developed the shopping instincts of a raccoon on bath salts. If something glowed blue and cost under $20, I was emotionally compromised. I stared. No profit pulse. No merchant preview. No target list. Just Earth. Kira floated beside me and looked too. Neither of us said anything for a while. Then a small plastic checklist drifted into my forehead. Space restored the comedy immediately. We approached Meridian Gate several hours later. The station was still small compared with the future plans, but it looked incredible. Connected modules, solar arrays, docking structures, experimental platforms, and a central commercial hub marked with Vane's logo. As we moved closer, my opportunity radar activated. One black dot. Meridian Gate Commercial Systems. Then a second dot appeared. I frowned. Kira noticed my expression. I told her there were 2 eligible entities on board. The passenger briefing had mentioned only Meridian Gate. We docked. The hatch opened. A crew member welcomed us aboard. The first few minutes were orientation, safety procedures, and learning how not to launch ourselves face first down a corridor. I moved slowly, gripping handrails. Kira adapted faster, which annoyed me. Mara joined by video from Earth and officially welcomed the first private commercial group. She reminded me that the notarization desk was active whenever I was ready. I told her I wanted to inspect the station first. She narrowed her eyes. She knew that tone. The second radar dot was moving, not physically moving like a person. It shifted relative to me as I passed between modules, showing that its location was somewhere near the docking hub. I followed it. Kira followed me because she had accepted her destiny. We reached a small equipment bay containing cargo lockers, emergency supplies, and research packages. The dot glowed behind one sealed locker. A label on the locker read Orbital Pantry Cooperative. I blinked. The station crew had created a tiny employee-owned business. Astronauts and rotating researchers pooled personal snack shipments, then sold extra specialty food to visiting crews at cost plus a small margin. The cooperative had been formally incorporated because different commercial crews used it. It was legitimate. It was a business, and it was in orbit. The locker had a tablet. Available today. Spicy noodles, coffee packets, dried mango, chocolate bars, novelty dehydrated cheesecake. Kira stared at me. I stared at the cheesecake. The system displayed merchant preview. Orbital Pantry Cooperative LLC. Price $9. Mara's carefully planned $25 notarization service was 3 modules away. But this was funnier. I selected dehydrated cheesecake. The tablet asked for payment. I tapped my Orbital payment card. Transaction approved. The locker opened. A silver packet floated into my hand. The system flashed so brightly I had to close my eyes. Registered business, Orbital Pantry Cooperative LLC. Profit participation 1%. Location, low Earth orbit. Qualified non-terrestrial transaction confirmed. Commercial domain expansion unlocked. I opened my eyes. Kira was staring at me. The money landed so fast that my dignity got margin called. I was rich, yes, but spiritually I was still crouched over a coupon bin. I told her it worked. Then another window appeared. New domain, extraterrestrial commerce. Eligible physical commercial activity may now register beyond terrestrial jurisdiction under standard conditions. Additional functions recalibrating. Kira asked what recalibrating meant. I had no idea. Then the opportunity radar vanished. For 3 seconds there was nothing. It returned. The map was no longer flat. It was a sphere. Earth appeared below us covered in thousands of blue, gold, and red gold points representing unregistered commercial entities I had not yet visited. Around Earth were new points, orbital research companies, private station operators, satellite servicing firms, zero-gravity manufacturing startups, commercial labs, cargo depots. Most were small. Some were gold. Meridian Gate was black. I looked at the dehydrated cheesecake packet floating in front of me. I had unlocked an entire economic domain by buying space dessert. $9. I opened the packet and took one bite. It tasted like drywall had been told about strawberries through email. I nearly spat it into a ventilation screen. Kira laughed so hard she drifted backward into the wall. I told her humanity had conquered orbit, but not cheesecake. cheesecake. Then we went to Meridian Gate's notarization desk. Mara watched through a live video link. The station administrator handed me a simple commercial participation document confirming Quiet Harbor's access to a public research data package. The notarization fee was $25. Merchant preview. Meridian Gate Commercial Systems Incorporated. I paid. Registered. The black dot vanished. Entity Horizon Classification Transformational. Current profit was tiny because the platform had just opened, but projected future commercial potential was enormous. I did not care about the small first payout. Forever was the whole point. If Meridian Gate became a major orbital trade hub in 20 years, I would still receive 1%. Mara congratulated me with the exhausted expression of a woman who had finally accepted that fighting my wallet was a waste of engineering talent. Then she asked whether I had already bought something from the pantry cooperative. I said yes. She closed her eyes. Apparently she had spent months designing the first official orbital transaction, and I had beaten her to it with bad cheesecake. That may have been the greatest achievement of my career. We spent 2 days aboard the station. I registered a small zero-gravity materials lab by paying for a commemorative sample capsule. I registered an orbital photography company by purchasing a high-resolution image of my hometown captured during our orbit. I registered a private communication service by paying for a 1-minute high-bandwidth message transmission to Quiet Harbor headquarters. Ben received the message. It said, "Tell Morning Bell I want a coffee when I land." The transmission cost $40. The company's first distribution to me was 19 cents. I treasured it. My first extraterrestrial passive income. At this point, capitalism and I were in a toxic situation. I kept spending pocket change, and it kept texting me millions at midnight, 19 cents, from space. I added it to the souvenir wall digitally because coins floating around an office sounded like another occupational safety incident. On the second night, Earth city lights passed below us. I floated near a window while Kira reviewed the new system map on the notes I described to her. Most extraterrestrial businesses were still in Earth orbit. Then I noticed the moon. 3 faint points had appeared there. One belonged to a robotic mining company operating automated extraction equipment under a commercial license. One belonged to a communications provider maintaining relay infrastructure. The third belonged to a tiny research outpost company that sold sample storage and equipment services to visiting missions. None had public visitors yet, but they existed. I focused farther out. Nothing around Mars except planned entities not yet eligible. A few asteroid resource companies appeared as future projections, but no active commerce. Then the system reached 5,000 total registered businesses, counting my newly added orbital companies. Portfolio milestone reached. New function unlocked. Commerce beacon. I waited for the explanation. Commerce beacon detects active commercial entities beyond currently mapped markets when a valid transaction network is within system range. That sounded useful. Then the beacon activated automatically. A pulse expanded outward from my position. Past the station, past nearby satellites, past the moon. The display remained empty. I shrugged. Kira asked what I saw. I told her probably nothing new. Then a point appeared, far beyond lunar orbit. Not blue, not gold, not red gold, not black. It was bright violet. I had never seen violet. I focused on it. The system hesitated, as if processing something unexpected. Then text appeared. Commercial entity detected. Registration status, unregistered. Jurisdiction, unresolved. Distance 612,400 kilometers. Merchant activity active. Physical point of sale confirmed. I stopped breathing for a second. 612,000 kilometers was far beyond the moon. There was not supposed to be an active retail counter sitting out there. Kira asked why I had gone quiet. I read the message aloud. She assumed it was a satellite company operating some distant platform. That was reasonable. Then the system added another line. Entity classification unknown. Accepted currencies. 14 recognized, 3 unrecognized. Kira slowly turned toward me. I looked back at her. 3 unrecognized currencies. A new line appeared. Nearest purchasable item translated as fermented stargrain beverage, small. I stared at the words. Kira stared at me. Somewhere beyond the moon, more than 600,000 kilometers away, the system had detected a legitimate business selling what appeared to be space beer. I did not know who owned it. I did not know who worked there. I did not know why the system could translate the menu. I did know one thing. It accepted money. And I had a very, very serious shopping problem. The numbers were so stupid I wanted to report myself for financial indecency, but I was pretty sure the complaint desk would somehow register too. I started laughing. Kira said no. I had not even said anything yet. She repeated no. I pointed at the window. She reminded me we were already in space because of cheesecake. I told her that proved the strategy worked. She said traveling beyond the moon for an alien happy hour was not a strategy. I said we did not know it was alien. She asked what human company accepted 3 currencies the system itself could not recognize. I thought about it, then I admitted she had a point. The violet beacon pulsed again. A second item appeared on the translated menu. Commemorative vessel docking token. Price equivalent, approximately $2.40. $2.40. I had spent more than that on the coffee that started everything. My brain immediately began calculating launch windows. Kira saw my face and grabbed the handrail with both hands as if she could physically anchor me to Earth from orbit. I told her we should at least investigate. She said investigating did not require bringing my wallet. I said the wallet was essential scientific equipment. She called me a financially diseased goblin. I considered that a promotion. Before we could argue further, Mara contacted us from Earth. Meridian Gate's long-range sensors had detected an unidentified object on a distant trajectory. Not a known spacecraft, not cataloged debris. It was moving deliberately toward Earth. Kira and I stopped joking. Then the commerce beacon updated again. Distance decreasing. Merchant activity active. Estimated arrival within system commercial range, 11 days. A new option appeared under the violet dot. Preview available. I focused on it. The system displayed a blurry silhouette, something like a vessel, something like a station. And on the side, translated into my language by the system, was a glowing sign. Travelers welcome. Below it was a smaller line. First drink, half price. I looked at Kira. She looked at me. I slowly reached for the $9 packet of terrible orbital cheesecake floating beside my shoulder. A year ago, I had been afraid to spend $5 on coffee. Now a mystery business from beyond the moon was approaching Earth with a discount sign, and my system was already asking whether I wanted the merchant preview. Kira told me not to press anything. I pressed it. The violet point expanded. Estimated commercial profit unavailable. Entity scale unavailable. Ownership structure unavailable. Potential profit class beyond current model. Then one final message appeared. New high-value opportunity detected. Physical visit required. I smiled. Kira swore. And somewhere out in the dark, a business I had never seen was getting closer.